All right, good evening. I'd like to call the August 21st, 2018 Board of Selectmen's meeting to order. Can we all please stand for the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So I do not have any announcements this evening. Is there anybody here for anything that is not currently on our docket? Seeing as none, got about a 4-minute delay to open up the hearing on a one-day liquor license for Oktoberfest.
Go to number 3.
All right. Oh, why don't we do that? A club liquor license change of officers for the Whitensville Fish and Game with possible votes. We have anybody from Whitensville Fish and Game here? No? You? Anyone? Nope.
Nope.
Do they need to be here for that?
I don't know, I was just gonna ask you the same thing.
I don't think they do they?
Liquor license, change of,
Just a change of
It's
officers.
a formality.
yeah. You signed and sworn.
So,
The ownership appears to be the same from the documents that we have. Current ownership, proposed ownership.
So what I would entertain is a motion to approve the liquor license contingent upon them providing the change of officers as needed to Suzanne.
Second. Or I'll make the motion, actually. So moved.
I'll second.
There we go.
Made by Dave and seconded by Tim. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 That didn't take 4 minutes.
Okay.
So why don't we go down to the minutes?
Well, we can, Mr. Chagrew's here.
Oh, why don't we do
In
that?
regards to number 4.
Yeah. Mr. Shagru? Come on up.
How are you, Kevin?
All right, how you doing?
Good, thank you.
So we're
I
appointing him.
apologize for calling you Mr. Chagrew.
Well, that's okay, because the other one has passed on.
So, an appointment to the Board of Registrars. Do we have a term on that?
June 30th, 2021.
Thank you.
I come with question volunteers. I'm all happy to have them.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Mr. Bowen, my wife is also a member of that board. Should I recuse myself from the vote?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay.
But you are not
I am not a member of the board, no. Of that board.
of that board.
This board, yes.
Well, Kevin is currently, well, I read you were the chair of the party 20 years ago, is that right?
20 years ago.
20 years ago? Things
Or
changed
more.
much, or is it basically the same?
I have no idea.
No idea.
About 20 years ago, there was some paperwork that didn't get in time, so my name wasn't put back on there. I still haven't seen it in the town book in the last few years, so it's been about 20 years since I've been on the board of the Democratic Board.
Right, and you serve on the library commission
Yeah.
still, as charter trustee, enjoying that?
At this moment, yes. I think unfortunately, if I read it right, if you guys appoint me to the Board of Registers, I'll have to turn in a resignation on the library. Either that or not run again.
Is that true?
Is it?
Yeah, because unfortunately, since I've been born, the town population has gotten above 2,000. When I was a kid, I could have probably stayed on the board because it would have been, Douglas was underneath the 2,000.
Well, that's too bad, but apparently you're comfortable with that, so.
Yeah, I mean, the current chairman of the Democratic Board sent out an email to whoever she could find so that there was a new Democratic representative on there. Since there was a deadline on getting someone in, basically I asked, and she said there was nobody who came forward. on the board, so I volunteered. Being that I know at one point, the vacancy was made by my mother retiring a year ago.
Okay. Great. Well, make a motion that we appoint Kevin Chagru to the Democratic, the Board of Registrars for the Democrat seat for a term ending June 30th, 2021.
I'll second that.
Okay, so the motion was made by Tim and seconded by Mike. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Congratulations.
Abstain.
One
yes.
abstained.
Okay.
I'll remember that when you come over communion.
Thank you.
He had to.
Nice. All right, I think we can,
We had 7:05? Yeah, I think so.
yeah, open the public hearing for a one-day liquor license for Oktoberfest and possible votes.
Play the part of Suzanne and read the paragraph there.
Right.
Sure.
So,
So there's an application from Oktoberfest to host a beer and wine tent on October 6, 2018, from 9:30 a.m. to 4 o'clock p.m. The application is complete. All abutters have been notified. MIAA, our insurance provider, asked that they submit an application for liquor liability insurance in September. They're asking that we approve the license for October 5th to October 7th in order to allow for purchasing, deliver, and clean up the event.
Is there anyone here from Oktoberfest?
Looks like they're planning to do exactly what they did last year.
Exactly, huh?
Yeah, it's the same hours that we'd approved last year, too.
Yeah. And I don't think there was any issues.
Well, I think it went pretty well, actually.
From all accounts, yeah.
So I see no reason to make a motion to approve the one-day liquor license.
I'll second.
It was made by Mike and seconded by Dave. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Now, we need a motion to close the public hearing on this one? I'll close the public
Should have
hearing.
closed it before we vote.
Oops. All
Can we
right,
revote then? Yeah.
we can revote. You want Motion
I move to close the public hearing.
I'll second.
made by Mike, seconded by Tim. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'll make the motion again to approve the one-day liquor license.
I will second again.
Made and seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. So, what time do we have?
I have 7:07.
Greenway Challenge.
Yeah, why don't we just move to that? Road use request for the Greenway Challenge. That's not it.
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
very good. And a few handouts here. Give me each, you two share for some. Oh, sure. I'll give you a copy when I'm done, but it's okay, I don't count. My name is Charles Thompson. I'm the chairman of the Greenway Challenge, which is an adventure race that we've been doing in the Blackstone Valley for 18 years. And this year, we would like to be in, do an activity in the Wallem Lake, and also linking different parts of this race, which is about 60 miles. Participants will be coming from Lincoln, Rhode Island, up Route 7, and then, and I can go over what roads here on the map. To get to Wallem Lake, we have a special permit from Mass DCR for the use of Wallem Lake, and they're going to have a mountain bike activity in there, and when that's done, the cyclists will leave Wallem Lake for Riverbend Farm in Uxbridge. So if you look at the thing I passed out, that's a map showing them coming up Route 7. I guess they also call it the Douglas Pike. And if you go to the second page, you can see the roads that we would like to use, which off of Route 7 would be a left turn onto Pine Street, and then kind of a right and a left onto Chestnut Street, and then to Walnut Street, and then into, and then onto Wallem Lake Road, and then into the Park Road, and then they'll have their activity there. The next map shows the departure from Wallem Lake after their activity is over. And one thing, that we looked at, which would, I think, be important, when they would exit out of Wallem Lake Park Road, they would take a left on Wallem Lake Road and then onto Southwest Main Street. But we wanted to avoid downtown East Douglas on a Saturday. And so we have them taking a left turn on Rydell Street, and then onto Grove and Mumford Street, onto Manchog Road, which becomes, I guess, Gilboa Street. And then they would exit straight across to Lackey Dam Road, and then they're out of the town of Douglas. So that's the route that we think, emphasizes some safety. I will, of course, consult with your police department and hire the necessary police details at the places that they deem necessary. We're happy to hire them. We're happy to pay them. And I know last year I talked to an officer, Mark Kraminski. Is he still with you?
Kaminsky, yeah.
Yeah. And so we set up, I think we had we had 6 details last year, so we had quite a few. So that's what we'd like to do. The date is September 29th. The size of this is there'll be about 60 teams, and what that means is there'll be only a total of 60 cyclists coming into Douglas and out of Douglas. And quite honestly, as the day goes on, they get quite spread out. So it isn't a big pack of cyclists all trying to pass each other and things like this. It's 24 miles up that Route 7 from Lincoln, Rhode Island, and it's uphill. So they'll be spread out. And again, I would talk to your police officers to determine where we need to hire details to ensure safety.
Any questions, Chief?
No, we haven't had any issues in the past. We've met with them, and like I said, Mark Kaminsky, who sets up the details, we meet with them and know that strategically where they think they should, like intersections coming out of Wallem Lake, we'll get them in, we'll get them out.
Right.
Like you said, they're usually pretty well spread apart, so they don't really cluster up, so we'll be able to take care of it for them.
Whatever your police department wants, though, is what, we don't argue, they're the safety experts in your own town, so we're happy to do whatever they want us to do.
So I wonder, going down 16 and taking a left onto Rydell on a Saturday, if that can get a little funky. Would it make more sense to go Cedar, down the causeway, up past the water slides and down?
Over the bridge.
That might be scenic.
So,
I'm sure you've thought of it. You don't need me to suggest ideas. It just, I know 16.
yeah,
can be-
our biggest concern was not getting into the downtown area. The logical way would have been all the way down 16, across the little bridge and the right turn onto Lackey Dam Road, but we wanted to avoid the cyclists, cars are parked on both sides of the street, doors open, or whatever.
bypass makes sense.
Yeah, I don't know.
Other than the transfer station would be the only sticky point, but I think that'd be okay.
But
Yeah, if there's an officer station there, I think that's
And we
sufficient.
would definitely have an officer for that left turn onto Rydell Street. Generally speaking, when we have left turns, that's a good place to put an officer.
Yeah.
You're trying to give these poor guys more miles to pedal.
No, I just think coming down that hill and having to turn left off of 16 is a little tricky, but I'm sure we'll look at it and make the right decision.
I'm happy to discuss that with your police, too. If there's a better alternative, that's fine. The second cycling is only 13 miles, so the first one's 24, so the second one's only 13. So it's not quite, you can modify it without killing anybody.
Only 13.
Yeah, well,
Only
you and I'll go
13.
hop on bikes right now,
Exactly.
we'll go ride the route.
So you have people that do all this as an individual?
As Iron Men and Iron Women, and you know, they finish near the top of the whole thing.
Yeah.
It's an amazing thing when they do it all themselves. We have teams of 2, 3, any number of, up to 8. We have women-only teams, men-only teams, co-ed teams. And it's a really exciting, it's more than a triathlon, although we've never gone for swimming, you know, we don't feel we can adequately supervise people swimming, but the water, we have one water segment on the Blackstone, and the other one is flat water down at Lincoln Woods. We'll get the people out in their kayaks, and we have a mountain bike segment, which is always fun too.
Sounds good to
If
me.
anybody wants to form a team, let me know. Selectmen's team?
We'd be the ones passed out needing medical attention.
I thought Dave wanted to captain the team.
I'll captain it, sure. Yeah. I'll be right behind you.
That's great.
Any other questions, guys, or?
No, I
I'll
think,
make a motion that we approve the request for the Greenway Challenge on September 29th.
I'll second.
It was made by Mike, seconded by Dave. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Good luck, thank
We
you.
appreciate it. Yeah, this week and next week are my weeks to visit police stations and to talk to selectmen and so forth. So thank you for the time.
All right, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so now I will open up our second public hearing for a one-day liquor license for the Grill on Main. They're asking to sell beer and wine in the parking lot on September 8th, 2018, from 2 o'clock to 6 o'clock p.m. Application is complete. Abutters have been notified. Because they're a for-profit business, they can sell beer and wine. Please, looking for us to approve the license for September 7th to September 9th in order to allow for the purchase, delivery, disposal, and beer and wine for the event. Anyone from the Grill on Main? Come on up.
hello.
How are you?
Go ahead.
Aye.
Listen,
So what's the event?
Pig roast.
Oh, that's right.
We did it last year as well. It went over really well.
Good.
So we decided to do it again, and if it goes well this year, we'll continue to do it.
Excellent.
Chief, any thoughts
I
or
don't have any concerns. They did it last year, and there were no issues.
no issues?
well, that's enough for me.
Me too. We always check, make sure he's
Oh, yeah.
happy. If our police chief's happy, we're happy.
That's good.
So, go ahead.
I'll make a motion to approve the pig roasts as explained in our packet.
I'll second.
It was made by Tim, seconded. Oh, wait.
Yeah, that's actually not the pig roast. It's
No, I'll make a motion to.
Go ahead.
Close the public
Close the
hearing.
public hearing. We'll get this done.
Yeah. See, Suzanne's not here. We're all messed up.
Exactly.
So Mike made the motion.
I'll second.
Dave seconded. All those in favor?
Aye. Now, Tim.
I'll make a,
Motion's for a liquor license.
yes,
Yeah.
and the pig. We'll make a motion that we approve the one-day liquor license for the Grill on Main as presented in our packet.
I'll second.
Made
If you
by,
guys were here on Saturday, we'd send you over some food.
we can be
We
here
sent
on
you to the police
Saturday.
station.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you want to come in on Saturday for a emergency
Emergency meeting?
meeting?
Or we could just go there, right?
We could.
Yeah, I don't think we really have to meet.
No. We'll just go down.
Right.
All right, so it's made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank
Good
you.
luck.
Thanks.
Okay, so we are done with all the fun stuff, I think. So is our Conservation Committee member here? Defer to Rich.
Describe the process.
Oh, sure. Well, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, any potential removal of a Conservation Commission member is subject to General Laws, Chapter 40, Section 8C. And the pertinent part of that statute says, any member of a commission so appointed may, after a public hearing, if requested, be removed for cause by the appointing authority. You're the appointing authority. The question before you is whether there is cause. And you could handle this matter going forward in a couple different ways. One is tonight you could listen to complaints and decide whether, based on the complaints that you hear, whether it would be appropriate to call for a full hearing and have the individual present, have the complainants present, put them under oath, and hear the case. So to go through that process tonight, you just hear what has been said and make a basic determination as to whether it is a matter worthy of further inquiry. You would not have to decide whether or not the complaints themselves were true or not. It's just whether there was enough to warrant an investigation into whether they were true. And you would do that at a subsequent hearing. That's one approach for doing it. Another approach for doing it is to hear from whatever complainants there are here tonight, make a determination as to whether a removal is warranted or not based on what you hear. If the complaints don't rise to the level of removal, but perhaps warrant the warning, you could do that. If the complaints don't warrant either a warning or a removal, you could just discharge the complaints and say that's that. If, on the other hand, the complaints you heard tonight warranted, in your opinion, after a vote, a removal, what you would do is you would take a vote to remove the individual as of a particular date, probably a couple weeks hence, such removal to become effective on that date unless the appointee requests a public hearing in the meantime. The statute is clear that there has to be a public hearing if requested. So it's not unusual to take a vote of removal for a date certain, which would be suspended if a public hearing was in fact requested. So to boil it all down, you essentially could have a show cause hearing tonight as to whether a public hearing should happen, do that on your own initiative, or you could just take a vote as to whether some action was required tonight, warning or removal, and then make the final action subject to the request for a hearing by the appointee.
Just a quick question, can removal be immediate?
Yes. Well, depending on which of the two methods you go. Because the statute does talk in terms of the ability to request a public hearing. If you go the show cause and then hold a public hearing route, obviously it could be immediate once the public hearing was held. On the other hand, if tonight you wanted to treat this as the vote where a removal would be considered, what you would have to do would be to make the removal probably effective a couple weeks hence, with an opportunity for the individual to request a public hearing, and then it would come back before you for a full-scale public hearing.
Okay. I believe we have some folks here tonight regarding this issue. Okay. So, I think we take Avenue 2. We can hear from the folks that are here. Give the Concom member an opportunity to speak his part of it and determine which route we want to go after that. Anybody disagree?
We're going to hear from the complainants no matter what. Is that
Yes.
correct? Yeah.
So if you guys want to come on up, grab a seat.
And at some point, I'm glad to listen to anyone and everyone, but at some point, it's the board's discussion. We
Yeah.
can hear and ask questions, but ultimately,
And with your permission, Mr. Chairman, I'd just suggest that anybody who's going to offer testimony to you be sworn in, and I'd be happy to administer an oath.
If you could, please.
Would all those who intend to testify before the Board of Selectmen this evening please stand and raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. You may be seated.
Thank you. All right, and just for our records, if I could get,
Steve Bagdis, 90 Peters Cove Road.
Carol Bagdis, his wife.
son, Adam Bagdis.
okay. So I believe we got an email from you folks.
Yes.
So if you could be so kind as to just start at the beginning and walk the board through what
Why
took
don't you
place.
start, because I was in when,
No, I know what happened. We were at our summer home with our grandchildren. I was out back with the grandchildren, and I heard someone yelling, and didn't know what it was. Could have been anyone on the road. And then I heard someone yelling, "Go get your parents." And of course, the kids all got scared and ran in the house. So I went around the back of the property, and this gentleman was there and said he's from the conservation, and he said he's new and they don't give him phone numbers and they don't tell him anything, but he needs to talk to me, and he wants to know if I'm going to call the police on him, if I'm going to have him arrested. And I just kind of looked at him and I said, "What?" He goes, "I don't want to get arrested, and we're currently having a battle with our neighbor. It's heading towards litigation right now." And I kind of commented, I wouldn't call the police on you, but they might. I didn't know who he was, and I didn't want to. We knew we were going for a dock permit, and I wasn't going to, say no to a conservation member. I didn't know the rules. So I said, okay. We walked around the property, and as we got halfway down the side of the property, before he even took a look at where the dock was, he says, "I know what your issue is. You have boundary problems. You're on your neighbor's property." And I didn't know what he was. At that point, we made it around the front, and I just said, wait a minute, I'm gonna go get my husband. He was sick, he was in the house, and as I turned around to get him, he says, "He's not gonna punch me, is he? Is he gonna hit me?" And at that point, I just made the grandchildren stay in the house, and I went and got Steve and brought him out, and then you can continue with what he said to you.
and I went out, he says, "You look like shit." I says, "Well, I'm sick. I had a stomach virus." And then he started talking about the dock. "I know the problem. It's the property line." And I went, well, I guess. "And what's your problem? What's your problem?" He kept saying. I says, "I don't have a problem. My neighbor turned me in because I did not get a dock permit. I went to conservation in June, and they told me that I should I have to file with conservation. I hired my conservation engineer that when I built my house, Robert Murphy. I says, "You gotta help me here. I'm kind of wrong." Adam had called the town hall in February, and they said, "No dock permit." We had our first conservation meeting. He shows up and went through this, and then he says, "What do you do for a living?" I says, "I'm the lead millwright at Wyman Gardens." I says, "What do you do?" And he says, "I'm a bum." And I looked at my wife and I said, "Well, I've kind of heard enough," and that more or less ended it.
And then he questioned whether I was his girlfriend.
Yes. And to go with that, we had our second conservation meeting, and all he did was complain about the property line. I'm there for conservation. The first meeting, he wasn't involved, and they had nothing to do with property lines. It was what my dock was made out of, where it was going, how it attached to the lake, what damage did I do to the lake. That's conservation. I agree 100% with that. And he wouldn't let it go. When my engineer started to speak, Steve Zisk says, "Be quiet, Bob. don't talk. The girl at the end of the table said, stop. They wouldn't even let him talk. That's on video, you get that.
I saw the meeting.
And we had the meeting, and it was more or less, if I didn't agree to them terms, I don't think I would have been able to get the conservation. And they said, well, you gotta get a permit, and I says, they tell me there isn't a permit. The next day, we went to the town hall. We need a permit for a dock. We don't have permits. Larry said, there's no permit. Well, conservation wants a letter saying there's no permit, and you sign it. So a week went on, we went back, nothing, and then we went back a week and a half later. All of a sudden, there's a permit now. So I got my application for a permit, which
Adele told
I
me
might be the
originally-
first.
Right, she told me originally there was no permit needed. I called again, and then even the secretary said, no, I talked to him like he just said, there's no permit needed. All of a sudden, now there's a permit, it says.
I had to pay a fine, $100, but it's,
That was through.
is there a permit or no permit? I mean, they can't even tell you.
It says the town requires a permit through building. But also, the other thing is, he's been over at Tom's house multiple times prior to the meeting.
Before the meeting, the day of the meeting, and after the meeting.
After the
That
meeting.
is illegal.
Yeah,
They're supposed to go as a group.
Tom is our neighbor.
That's, was gonna be my.
And he's the guy
This is the
complaining
neighbor you
about
have
my
the
dog.
dispute with.
Right.
Yes.
And the last time he met with him, he said, I'll let you know. I
Right.
got all evidence, I got pictures, whatever you guys want to see,
We have security cameras, so
we see everything.
what we told you is the truth, and we have proof.
They told me that they're supposed to come as a group, not just one individual. They're
I have
supposed
one
to
of that
notify you like
first.
Steve Zisk did, and Steve Zisk was polite. He came and told us what was going on. Not supposed to do what he's doing behind doors. I was wrong. Unannounced
So, Matt,
pop-ins by conservation is not something that.
we condone.
Steve Zisk wanted to see, he called us, I'm in the phone book, we met him there, that simple.
He was very professional.
And he was professional. I'm surprised he let this happen.
Do we or do we not have a dock permit on the books?
Well, when you're in the water, you need a dock permit
Okay.
from conservation. The discussion, I'm still trying to get to the bottom of whether a dock is a structure for purposes of the building code.
It's removable though.
It's removable, so, but having said that, there is a structure that holds up weight.
Right, it's on how
And
the
it has to
pillars.
survive the forces of the wind and
Right,
everything
it's
outside.
on pillars.
I'm a little bit mystified myself.
So docks have been in lakes for years, and all of a sudden, we're trying to find out if there's a permit.
I don't know what they told you, so.
Am I the first?
I mean, there's a lot of new docks this year. There's probably 5 or
Yeah.
6.
Do all of them have permits?
And that's right. They don't. We know they don't.
How enlightening.
Yes.
You had some
And that
questions, Mr. Vice
stipulation
Chair.
on property line on my conservation permit, I don't want it removed. That doesn't belong on there. It's nothing to do with conservation.
No one owns the lake above and below the water. Even the conservation agent originally said that in the meeting. There's a lot of property line disputes on the lake where the dock goes over other people's property because you don't own the property. So you're starting to open a can of worms.
So,
My
I have-
dock goes out, and I even have it tipped more towards my end. The rule is you can go square off your property, and I actually tipped it so it stays. Most people just put them straight out.
can I ask Mr. Bowen, one question?
Sure.
Prior to.
Yep.
So, regarding the stipulation on his conservation, this board doesn't have purview to ask that or require that to be removed, do we?
No.
No.
And with respect to the complainants, not only is it not within your jurisdiction, it's also not directly germane to the subject matter of the hearing, which is the gentleman's conduct at the time he was acting as a Conservation Commission member.
Understood. I just wanted to ask, so. Sure. Go ahead.
I just
David.
want to touch upon a couple points in your email, ma'am, and just clarify them, or
Yep.
just confirm that, I'm not doubting you at all,
Nope,
but just
that's fine.
confirm them. Did he say to you, Mr. Vecchione say to you, be nice to him and he could be your best friend?
Yes, he did.
Okay. At this point, when when he had visited your home, the incident that we're talking about, Had your engineer submitted any drawings to anyone?
Not a one.
Okay.
Nope.
Did Mr. Vecchione say to you that he had already looked at drawings that showed a line out
Yes, he
into the
did.
lake? Okay.
That's what we couldn't understand, and I texted, and I can show you my text, to our conservation guy. I said, I don't understand what just happened. I'm very nervous about this gentleman. I don't want to ruin our chances with conservation by ticking someone off, but he told me a bunch of things that I'm not comfortable with. Am I wrong? And the answer we got back from him is, you're absolutely not wrong. They have to come as a group, they have to call, they have to make an appointment, and no, I did not submit anything.
Okay, thank you.
I don't have a problem.
I have one last question. He asked if you had been fined for not getting a permit, and you
Yep.
told him you paid a $100 fine?
Yep.
Did he express an opinion at that point on what he thought the fine
Yeah,
should be?
he said in his opinion, you should, I think you should be fined daily until it's.
$100 a day
$100
was
a day
his
until
words.
it's fixed.
Okay, thank you.
I don't have any problem getting permit, but I should be treated fair. This wasn't fair, what happened.
I won't dispute that.
Okay.
I don't have any further questions.
No.
On this issue.
Did he use the word shit when,
Crap.
Crap.
Crap. He says you look
Crap.
like crap.
Oh, my.
it's okay,
Shame on you.
it's important.
All right. So, I mean, I've heard what I needed to hear on that side. Mr. Vecchione, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, but I'd like to say it from there.
Absolutely.
Do anybody else first?
Is there anyone else here regarding this same incident
Or anything
or
else?
anything else?
I'd allow him to ask questions of them if he wants.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Gary, come on up.
Hey, just a second.
While we wait for that, in our packet, we had some information, 5 items in particular. The 4th and the 5th, I'd like to talk about at some point. Interactions with our town administrator, if that's appropriate.
On the same subject?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
Do you have a specific question, or should I just comment on something that was said, or?
Well, I guess I'd like some understanding and explanations, because if
Okay.
what these folks, and I'm going to preface it, if what these folks said are true, I'm going to have absolutely no problem recommending removing you from the board.
I don't blame you.
Okay.
So the first thing is that, well, let me preface it by this. I've always been taught that people who know what to do in a job situation will always have a job. But the people that know why to do something will always be their boss. So in other words, why these people are coming against me now should be really obvious to you. They had a decision that went against them, and that decision was one that they're not happy with. One neighbor is very unhappy, and one neighbor is very happy, because what went on up there for a certain amount of time is now going to be over. As far as the things that I said, Mr. Bagda said I said the S word. Mrs. Bagda said I said the C word, crap. I didn't say either one of those to that man. I don't know this man from anywhere. Been in this town 59 years, and I was told by the conservation, I don't know who specifically, that we're going to do site walks. So the fact is, the law is not that you have to do a site walk together. That's not the law, unless council would disagree with that. As far as practice, it's always practiced that because the conservation is, each individual member has a different schedule that they have to keep, that it's impractical to go out to a site together. It's just impractical. So what I did was I went to Peters Cove Road. I saw some people, some children playing there. An hour beforehand, the Douglas Police Department called and said, somebody called on you on Perry Street because you went on a site visit unannounced. That site visit turned out to be nothing, but she felt like she wanted to call the police.
So when I went to Mr. Bagda's property, of course, I was gun shy from what had previously happened. So when I said, "You're not going to call the police on me, are you?" It was tongue-in-cheek. It was not, I don't want to call it a joke, but it was me prefacing the visit like, hey, I'm not going to have what I just had down the other place experienced, with them. So there is truth here, and there's some untruth here. I just passed the Massachusetts real estate test to get licensed real estate. I've been speculating real estate in and around Blackstone Valley for over 32 years. I decided to get my license. Now, one of the very first things they talk about is constructive material defect. So material defect is when you know for a fact that there's something wrong with a property, you have to let a new buyer know that you know what's going on with that property. So the material defect here on the Bagdas property is the fact that that dock is subject to building code. When Adele Reynolds was building inspector, she licensed some of them, or many of them, I don't know how many, but I speak of one particularly on the point where Ross Smith used to live on the reservoir. And I believe that that's the case, but there are permits that have been done. I spoke to Larry Lynch in the parking lot 5 minutes before I came into this meeting, so that I don't talk out of school and let him bring the decision to you. I can tell you that he's going to clarify this tomorrow or the next day so the town council and this board here understands what his decision is. So the material defect is that this line is the property boundary for the Kochanowskis, or Kolanowskis. So they live on one side, Mr. Bagdas lives another, and then there's a line that goes out, an imaginary line, once the property boundary stops. Now, Mr. Bagdas just represented in front of you in the town that he tilted that dock away from Mr. Kolanowski. That was the request that we made. I'm assuming that he's telling the truth and that it was done after the meeting, because here's the way that dock was before, into this man's property. So when he drove a boat, he had to worry that he's going to whack this dock, that somebody's going to swim off of there. But anyway, so my goal was to try to wrap this up. In fact, that this town would never have a lawsuit against it because of a decision I made. I know of a material defect. Everybody knows there's a material defect up there. There's a telephone pole in the middle of Peters Pond Cove Road, which it's been purported that this man moved. I don't know anything about that. I'm just telling you there's a telephone pole that's there, and Peters Cove has been moved away from that pole. There's a big dog fight that's going on up there, or cat fight, however you want to phrase it. It's not a happy situation. That has nothing to do with conservation. When I went to speak to that man, it was the same consideration I gave Mr. Bagdas. I could not find his number in the book, or I'll retract that. I think I found his number in the book, but he didn't answer because it's a summer home. Maybe it was ringing at the house, I don't know. My only goal to go up there first was to do the guy a favor by saying, hey, look, we have a meeting coming up. I'm not voting on anything unless I actually see the field. I want to see what it looks like in the field so that I can talk intelligently when I go on that conservation board. Now, I've put up with a lot from that conservation board in the last 20 years, and I've been one of the biggest scofflaws before I changed my point of view because of the misery that the sitting board previously gave to me and to Boy Scouts and everybody that came before them. But that's beside the point. Another thing that's a problem is what the council would probably agree to is an attractive nuisance. If we create an attractive nuisance where this guy's dock is here and he allowed to swim off there or dock off there into Mr. Kolanowski's property, we've created a problem. And that nuisance is that children in Mr. Kolanowski's dock have to dodge this man's dock. So there's nothing personal here. How could I possibly have anything personal against him when I don't even know the man? Yes, I said something about Wyman Gordon, like, yeah, they're going down the tubes. Well, everybody knows that. But the fact is, I talk too much sometimes. And that was probably one of them. It was nothing personal. He's a very big guy and very imposing. So when he came into my space, I probably said, you're not going to hit me, are you? Because in this world that we live in, people are sucker punching people all the time because of political views. So I was slightly worried that that was going to happen. I said, "Are you his girlfriend?" I don't know if I said that specifically, but I was trying to understand, were you his wife? In other words, it might have come off as fresh or something like that, and for that, I will certainly apologize. It was not meant to be anything other than a little light talk before Mr. Bagdis came out. I want to say something else, that I'm so proud of you for pledging allegiance to the flag, and I want to say thank you for that. I want to say thank you to the Bagdis to come before you. You have complaints in your hands from other people. I will not address those complaints without them here. I have every right to face my accuser. I have a letter that I'm happy to read to you concerning them, but getting back to this. One says I said crap. Which is it? It's not both. So I didn't say either one. Why in the world would I say that to someone I do not know?
Well, I guess here's where some of my concerns are. Is I understand that you're trying to look out for the town, but your approach to their home was based off of that of a conservation commission or somebody on the conservation commission. None of the issues that you're bringing up to order as to attractive nuisance or what was the other one?
Material defect.
Material defect have anything to do with conservation.
Sure they do. Do you mind if I interrupt?
Well, your task under the Conservation Commission is to protect wetlands and do what falls under that board, but where you're dealing with structural defect and things like that, I have a building inspector, that's what they do.
But here's the thing, Mr. Morse. 20 years, and see, I'm going by what happened the last 20 or 30 years in town, that they always, if they saw something on a plan that another committee was supposed to catch, they would bring it up. This is a fact. This is a material defect. There is an issue. He's going to have to obey side boundaries. That's the problem. If you want to talk just about conservation, I have no problem with that. But they brought my character into this, and they said some things that I should have the right to defend. I'm pretty much done with that. So if you want to focus on the conservation issue, here's the thing. He just said that this is going to be a temporary dock. It's not a temporary dock. It's a temporary dock. Well, let me back up. I'm not sure if I'm saying it right, whether it's temporary or seasonal, but the fact is they're on piers that are on concrete blocks.
No one said it was temporary. We said it was removable dock.
Okay, so let's talk about that if you want. The removable dock is attached to the property by, I think, a seawall, concrete. I think that's how it's done.
Probably with a header board on it.
Sure, whatever it is. Is it going to be removable every single season? Even if it is, that's Larry's department. So if you want to talk about a decision I made and say, Gary, don't bring up material defects anymore, then tell us that. Part of the problem is Steve Zisk is part-time now. You can't get hold of the guy in the weekends. I live up there. I have to do site walks for free, so I go when I can. It's volunteer, so I don't get paid.
All right, so is the chairman of conservation saying, Gary, I need you to go do a site walk?
No, Maria LaJoy would be. She didn't on this particular site because I was so brand new. What Maria does is, I have an email that would give you an example. Should say, hi, site members or Conservation Commission members, could you please do a site walk on such and such a thing? So the law is, maybe council could tell me I'm wrong, that you go by yourself if you can't go with a group. If 3 people are together, it's considered a quorum under mass law. If 2 people are together, you can talk about things because it's not considered a quorum. Here's the thing, guys. I'm brand new at this. I've always been on the other end of the table. I have knowledge, like you know, from my application that I laid on really thick, that I want to level the playing field for, property rights or, that kind of thing. But my experience is in implementing them in the field. There's nobody in the last 20 years on that board who's put in box culverts, regular culverts, concrete culverts, et cetera, sat in an excavator for 40 hours a week, except for me. So if you're telling me that I'm doing my job wrong, tell me how to do it right. I want to do it right. I'm teachable. I want to do that. So what I did was, I knew it was wrong because I've seen it from a boat, because we live on the lake. I knew that dock was in his property. His engineer said that it's called a littoral line, and maybe council can answer to that, maybe not, where the line goes with the curvature of the land at the thing. That's beside the point, too. But I'm asking if you keep me on this board to tell me what happens when something blatantly obvious comes up that has nothing to do with us. Why would me permitting it subject to building inspector's approval, why is that a bad thing? And the thing is, I'm only one of 4, and it was unanimous, I believe. It was definitely a majority, so everybody agreed that that's what should have happened.
There are some questions when you're ready.
Please feel free.
Mr. Vecchione, I'd like to ask you the same questions that I asked the Bagdis family, if you don't mind. Do you recall saying to anyone there while you were on the so-called site walk that if they were nice to you, that you could be their best friend?
No.
Do you recall saying that you
I'd
would...
like to...
Hold on.
Well, I'd like to add to that. I think I should, because this is touched on...
Well, you either said something similar to that or
I
you
did say something similar.
Okay, go ahead.
I said, hey, I'm your best friend on that board. Not, I can be your best friend, or I will be your best friend if you do what I say.
How about the part about being nice to you? Did you say that part?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I mean, it happened a month ago, but could I expand a little bit on that, or expound on it?
Certainly.
Look, we all know why I was brought on that board, or one of many, because 20 years of holy terror had come to an end with the previous board and previous boards. So when I say something which to me is tongue-in-cheek, I'm your best friend on that board, not I can be if you pass me $50, or I will be if you do what I say. Of course not. I'm your best friend because I'm the most reasonable. And don't forget, there was only 2 there, so I was talking about the ones that just left. They're historically known for being unreasonable.
Do you recall saying to any of the Bagdis family that you had previously looked at drawings that showed a line out into the lake?
I did say something about I saw a drawing, but I don't think it was a drawing. I probably said I saw a map. And what the map shows is the property line. The littoral line thing, I don't believe I saw it until the meeting. So you can go to the selectmen, the assessor's office, and get a copy of any map of any property in town. So when you see the 2 together, all you notice is a dock out in the water, and you can see that it's in fact tilted. So when I walked onto the property, I probably absolutely said, I can see what the problem is here right off the bat. Anybody could see it.
So you told them you looked at a drawing that showed a dock tilted to one side?
I don't want to use the word drawing. I would say map, because I was not privy to any drawings before the engineer came. And I'm hoping I'm explaining that well enough.
Okay. And when Mr. Bagdis told you that he had paid a fine, did you tell him you thought the fine should be $100 a day?
I have short-term memory issues. I may or may not have. I'm not going to dispute it.
Okay. And just a statement to follow up that question, as one of the board members who voted you into the position, I can assure you that we didn't do it with any mandate to clean up 20 years of holy terror. That wasn't a discussion, it wasn't on the record, and I can tell you, at least from my point of view as one of the members who voted, it didn't have anything to do with your vote to fill a vacant position on a commission.
I appreciate you bringing that up, and I want to apologize if I put the board in any negative light because of that. I mean, I respect you guys more than you know, because volunteer work is not fun. So I apologize if that was taken in any negative light. Would you accept that?
Certainly.
Thank you.
You have any other questions?
I am good, thank you.
Well, I would just say the end of tyrancy isn't $100 a day fine. It's certain the
What's that?
Conservation Commission over the last 20 years have been issuing that. So to be a friend of applicants or what have you, I think we might
Point
be
taken.
in disagreement.
Thank you.
All right, docks notwithstanding, an area that caught particular concern for me was, and this was brought to my attention by my wife on Dynamic Douglas, regarding your idea about eminent domain and the hot walk and some comments that were issued there. I don't know if there really need much discussion other than to tell you that whether it was a joke or whether it was intended, it was offensive on a number of fronts, specifically to an entity that probably works as harder than, I would say, 99% of all Douglas people. The concern is the idea that you would just go on your own and take that idea and follow through with it on your own without working within the confines of the committee or getting a blessing from economic development or working with economic development on the idea to massage that and to go about it the right way. And
But how did I do that?
how did you,
How did I do something outside of what you had preferred me to do? You said you didn't want me to do that and take it and run with it on my own. How did I do that? I put a posting on a town site that has 3,600 members, and I threw out an idea. I threw it out the night that we were here and didn't mention, the Chinese food being taken as eminent domain. I mean, that's just a rough outline. I didn't certainly, as someone suggested, go there as any sort of Conservation Commission member. As a matter of fact,
but at some point you do represent the town.
so how do I, and here again, I'm asking for your advice, how do I separate myself from a guy who's lived in town for 59 years, a guy who for 32 years has speculated real estate, and then a guy who now has a real estate license that is going to open up and, as a matter of fact, is legally allowed to have a legal real estate office in town, as well as one in Uxbridge? How do I separate the three?
If I could, really quickly, and then you're more than welcome to do it. It's something that I can tell you that we all walk with a lot of caution in anything that we say on a public forum. Myself, I'm on Dynamic Douglas, and you have to make absolutely positively certain that you are not representing the views of your board, commission, or the town itself. And it comes down to simple, and I'm certainly not trying to sound flippant, you think before you speak.
Absolutely, and I have a really nice thing I could read you, or we could skip it. To answer that directly, a woman, Mary Weiss, or she's a Mary Sugaru, asked in that public forum, did I have authority to do that by board? Did you see my answer? Well, to just give you the time, it's really not fair if the thought comes out without the follow-up. The follow-up is, no, I have no authority, it's in writing.
I'm looking for that part, but you had something, Mr. Bowen, I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The gentleman, of course, has his First Amendment rights to post whatever he likes on Facebook or any social media platform, distinguishing, of course, that when he does so, he should not represent that he's doing so as a town official, and that what he does on his own time to express his own opinions is his business, not ours. I think really the question before the board is the gentleman's conduct with these persons, with the other complainants, and whether that conduct is appropriate for someone representing the town of Douglas. Just to clear one matter, there was a statement to the effect that site visits had to be conducted individually rather than as a group. As a matter of law, that's not correct. Chapter 30A, Section 18, has the definitions under the open meeting law, and if I could read the definition of meeting, it reads, meeting, a deliberation by a public body with respect to any matter within the body's jurisdiction, provided, however, meeting shall not include, has a bunch of exclusions, A, an on-site inspection of a project or program so long as the members do not deliberate. So the law does not require that site inspections be made by one person. It could be an entire board. I just wanted to make that clear to you. Thank you.
Could I address something to that? Maybe I misspoke. I wasn't saying that I had to go up by myself. I think I meant that I was allowed to. Is that fair to characterize that I can go out by myself? Like if you create a policy that says, hey, don't go out by yourself, then we won't do it. But because there's 4 members of the board who all work different shifts and schedules, we go out when we can. I mean, that's sort of a well-known process. going out together is great, and I'll do whatever the board says, but I think, in essence, this is about growing pains. I made some mistakes, I made some stumbles. It was not my intention to put the town that I love in bad light.
With the board's permission, I'd just like to ask one question. You had made a statement about, to the effect of, you're not going to call the police, or a remark to that effect. And then, could you just repeat for me what the reason for that remark was?
Well, I went up to Perry Street for a site visit, because my theory is when somebody comes before the Conservation Board, if they have to have a site walk before we make a decision, why not go ahead of time so that when they come into that board, they don't get stretched out for another month, getting people to go visit the site and acclimate themselves with what's going on. So Maria gives us the packet on Thursday by email saying, this is what's going on, can you go out to a site walk? Well, if the Conservation Commission is on Monday, and she's giving us on Thursday, you've got Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, the town hall's closed. Steve Zisk's unavailable. Tracy's unavailable. All the other members are unavailable. So I go out and look at a site visit with permission. Now, I just sent an email to...
Can I just get clarification?
Yeah.
Whose permission?
Permission...
By the homeowner
Yeah.
or the... So you called the homeowner in advance to request?
I should be.
Did you in this case?
No, not the very first one.
Did you show up on their site, on their property, unannounced?
What was the first one?
Yes, she was in her driveway, and she said, hey, I know you from Jumbo Donuts. What are you here for? And I said, I'm here from Conservation. That was the lady that called the police on me later on. So the whole issue with the Bagdis was predicated by 2 hours earlier going on to a site where I had a very nice, normal conversation with a lady, and she told me what was going on. Then her boyfriend called me. He was happily engaged in conversation. And then I drove home, and 1 hour later, I get a call from the police department, say, hey, somebody complained that you were talking to him. And I said, you got to be kidding. I didn't think there was an issue. So then, whether it was that same day or a couple days later, I spoke to the Bagdises, and that's where I was gun shy, because someone had called the police on me. Not like I was confrontational or belligerent or any of that stuff. If anything, I was trying to diffuse any kind of potential situation that was going to cause a problem, because by Mr. Bagdis's body language, I thought I'm either going to get a handshake or a punch in the nose any time. So, you know, again, this is a learning process that I want to learn.
I guess my concern is showing up unannounced.
Sure.
On somebody's property.
Exactly. Well,
To do a site visit, because I would have an issue with that if somebody was
Sure.
on my property, and I'd probably call the police on you as well.
sure.
Can I say something? I just have a question.
She needs to come up because there's
Yeah,
no mic back there.
there's no mic back there, and I believe the young lady in the blue shirt also had a question at one point. While you're on your way up, Nick, do you have any record of the call that was brought in regarding the incident on Perry Street with,
There's a log entry for that.
there was a log entry for it? Is it possible, if it's not too much trouble, we might be able to, do you remember with the officer that reached out to him, or?
I actually have it.
Okay.
There was no action taken. They just had a little conversation.
Please.
First question is, if you show up unannounced and someone calls the police on you, why would you do it again?
That's what I wanted to say too.
And secondly, who requested this and why was it needed? Because Steve Zisk was there, took multiple photographs, got all the information. The first meeting there, it was up on the screen. They knew everything about everything. He knows a lot more about what's going on with us and our neighbor. That's where the police is coming into play. Us calling the police on him calling the police and filing false police reports against us. He knows a
If you
lot
want the
too
police
much.
report, ask Nick, we've spoke to him.
He said, are they saying I filed a police report against them?
No.
No, I believe they're discussing the neighbor.
You just know way too much about what's going on.
Steve Zisk visited your property?
Absolutely.
Was that before or after Mr. Vecchione did?
Before.
For the first meeting.
For the first
He
meeting.
called, said he'd meet us there, and we went.
Not to get too much into this, but the first, if I understand this correct, the you had your first hearing, you accepted the
We did what they
$100.
said, and the second
Absolutely.
hearing was totally different.
Bring your paperwork, bring what the dock's made
So
out
things were
of.
working on a tract that was
Absolutely.
pleasing to the Conservation
We
Commission.
did what the town wanted us to do.
Right, then we appoint our new members to a couple committees that we did. The second half of your process is, you
It's
know,
all about property lines, has nothing to do with conservation whatsoever.
You did the site walk of your own volition. You weren't asked to by Maria,
Which one?
the one to the,
Sure, it's common practice, but I did stay outside their property boundary and say to the children, could you get your mom or something like that? I wasn't yelling or screaming. I was asked to be in, could I come on your property? It wasn't me saying, hey, I didn't even have the metal sign they put on your side. I just went there because I live around the corner. I was trying to do them a favor. Like,
So why did you meet with the Kalinowskis before you came to us?
I don't know that it's a good idea to talk to back and forth directly, but if you want me to,
I'll entertain it.
whatever you want. So, what was your question?
Why did you meet with Tom Kalinowski before you even came to our property?
Wanted to get his take on it.
You don't need his take on it.
He's an abutter.
This
Did
is-
you know you're not supposed to go by yourself? They go as a group.
You're
Well, I think we just-
biased.
And you call and you make an appointment, a meeting?
I think we just addressed that. He said it was allowable. We don't have a bylaw. The conservation doesn't have a policy that says you go alone or not. As a matter of fact, it's common practice for the last 30 years to go together, and if you can't, to go by yourself. It was a Thursday or Friday. Everybody was closed. Steve Zisk works a few hours a week, and then on a Saturday. He doesn't answer his phone on Saturday, so how could I get the
I think
information?
the board needs to know that Tom has stated that he will stop at nothing to get that dock out of there. He didn't want to work with Detective McLaughlin, who tried to reason with him. He said, I want it gone.
Understood.
There again goes back to my point of why this is happening, not what is happening.
Well, to that point, that's a separate issue, and and I'm not trying to be rude, it's
No, it is a
outside of what we do.
It is.
And I understand that it all plays into what was going on. I think my hitching point is that, there's some site visit made, perhaps you're an overly enthusiastic new member to a board,
I don't
going to
disagree
do
with
those
that.
things
But there's no malicious intent.
unsolicited, I guess.
I agree with that, too.
So, you had any other?
I had a question for the chief, but apparently we'll hold it.
We'll hold.
Yes. And I do want to see the log note that he mentioned in regards to the earlier call on Berry Street.
I guess, and I'll wait for the chief's point on that, but if it's one of those things in understanding enthusiasm and stuff like that. I know my first couple of Board of Selectmen's meeting, I was relatively quiet to just try and
Sure.
learn the process.
The town engineer said that I should wait 6 months before saying anything at the board.
I don't think I waited that long, but I was relatively quiet during the beginnings of it, but
I'm just trying to be an engaging member of the conservation, bring a different viewpoint maybe.
I think
I love the town. I love the wetlands and how they function. I've had so much experience. You guys are always looking for volunteers. So I finally decided to get out of my shell and say, what can I do to help?
I get that. And I think where my first warning bell in my head would have been is if I'd gone out on a site walk and ended up with a call from the police, I'd probably back off and say, let's get some better guidance from the rest of the commission prior to.
And I don't disagree with that necessarily, but the fact is that there were one out of 11 things that were going on because you didn't have quorum for 2 months. So that first meeting, we stayed till 11:15 from 4 hours. So I thought the more I can get out of the way, the better it would be. I cannot make an intelligent conversation unless I'm informed. So to talk to a neighbor next to them who, we talk about townie versus newcomer, that kind of stuff. My mother, who's 83, it was her aunt, Nita, who owned that house from 50 years ago. So it could be a simple thing as saying, hey, how are you? What's your take on what's going on with the dock? He had to be at that meeting because he had the rights as an abutter. So there's nothing unusual about that. The unusual part was that I put somebody in an awkward position, and I'm sorry for that. and that I've reached out to numerous people. I filled out my ethics course on the website for Mass. I've talked to Bill Cundiff in length about what to do, what not to do, talked to Tracy Sharkey, how to go about things. I've spoken with Steve Zisk occasionally. The problem is, and Steve Zisk is very well thought of in that field. Every time I talk to somebody, they're so happy with what he did. But he does not make policy, and he does not make the decision. The Conservation Commission members do.
Well, I guess, just to one of your points, I'm going to let Dave, I know he's got some questions, and I'll go on record with it. The townie versus newcomer thing is beyond infuriating to me.
Me too.
Because it doesn't matter if you are a seasonal resident of Douglas, if you've been here for 10 minutes, for 10 years, or for 59 years. If your zip code's 01516, you're a resident of this town, and you're one of the people that I represent sitting on this board.
Right.
And I'll be quite frank, I don't give a good goddamn who's a townie and who isn't. If you're a registered voter, you have my ear.
And that's why I like you being Board of Selectmen Chairman. So you've got my vote. We're on the same team. I just need to be taught, your ways and what your policies are, and give me some marching orders, and not have the telephone go unanswered when I need to have a question answered.
My personal policy, and I embrace it from where I was just on vacation, it's just just treat everybody like a decent human being.
Absolutely.
You don't walk onto somebody's property with any kind of an assumption, other than if you're there to do something, conservation-wise, stick to whatever it is that's within your purview, and focus the conversation that way.
And I will do that going forward. You have my word on that. I've learned from this lesson. I've sent an email out to Maria. Matt Mojix came back unsent. The email said, I will not go on another site, and I could pop it up on my phone. I will not go on another site unless I have a written authorization with a preferred contact number from every single applicant. So we did that with the folks that had the tornado damage. And again, because I was gun shy about this situation, I said, look, folks, I'll come right out because I have time, but, please get that. And both of them came up to the town hall. Well, they shouldn't have had to do that. If they wanted to hand it to me on site, I'll accept that. And I think the policy, Mr. Morse, is that will be in every folder, because it was overwhelming at first, a 3-month caseload or 2-month caseload, and I'm trying to do a good job. So I'm out there, trying to sell magazines like a little kid, and I go to one too many houses, or I go somewhere where they don't want me. That's what this is in essence. Anyone who knows me knows that I'm trustworthy, and I do not say things like, you're full of whatever, and especially don't do it when I don't even know the man. That is a falsehood. And I'll finish with this. When I was in real estate school, they said, don't call somebody a liar. Don't. I'm not calling these people liars. We all believe our version of the truth. He said I said the S word. She said I saw the C word. There's a minor discrepancy there. I did not say it. Plain and simple. You fire me tonight, we'll go from that point. I'm going on record saying I did not say this man looked like either one of those words. Why would I? Thank you for your time.
Yeah. You had questions, Dave?
I did. I have a question for the chief. Are you aware of any other calls to the department regarding Concom members going to private residences on private property?
That's my recollection, no.
All right. And we talked about a log note earlier on Mr. Vecchione's earlier visit to, I think it was Perry Street.
Right.
Do we have that?
Yes.
Is that something we could see?
Sure.
All right.
I'll go on record saying the S word's way more fun to say than the C word. Yeah.
Never
Just
been
saying.
said on these airs.
You didn't behave yourself, Juan.
Matt, in the memo, items 4 and 5, do you have anything to add?
Not really. Those are informational for the board. As for item number 5, after the Concom meeting, the Bagnus family came to see me in my office. I wanted to make sure that the board was aware of that follow-up conversation, but you had that information tonight with especially Carol's letter. So I think that clip, that anything I would say is obviously trumped by the people who experienced it. The outcome of our discussion in my office was referral to the board of where in the hearing your case was taken up, and to ask the members to watch from about an hour and a half into the meeting and for about half an hour to make up their own minds. But that was the purpose of that. As for the 260 Southeast Main, it came to my attention through more than one conversation, and Mr. Vecchione did come to see me to talk about it and you're having problems emailing to me because nothing that you send gets to me, and it's because you have a inappropriate or inaccurate, I think it's a .gov or it's .org. But he had sent some pictures to me of some runoff that was occurring at this site. Now, this is a different interaction. I don't think you spoke to anybody, but the point of my bringing that up was you came to my office, you said you had noticed all these things and that there are violations there. My advice to you was that those things should be brought to Mr. Zisk's attention because he is the professional that's paid to review these things, that you should not be out there by yourself. If you want to take pictures and send them to Mr. Zisk for his attention, then that's the proper process.
And I didn't go on that
I just
property,
wanted to
right?
make it clear that there are others in the community because the property owner was not thrilled with you and has complained to others, but not to me, and hasn't written anything for the board. But that interaction did occur.
Sure, and I didn't go on his property. Did he represent that I did, or? Yeah, okay.
This is the Southeast Main Perry?
Yeah, there was a retaining wall being replaced
Yeah.
next to a pool, and there was some very heavy rain, and there was runoff from the piles of material that were resulting from the work. The runoff was making its way to a body that's subject to protection under the wetlands bylaw. But there was subsequent conversation that I wasn't part of, but my understanding, hearsay, is that there's no problem with this, that the buffer zone was sufficient, and that the whole thing was just cleared up, correct? Is that what you?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, this report, if I'm reading it correctly, it says that you followed her into the driveway at the location.
Well,
No, this is, you're switching to Perry Street?
That's Perry Street, yeah. That's
So
a
you're
different
done with me?
log, Tim.
we're talking about 260 Southeast.
Southeast Main.
Are you going back to Perry?
Perry, yeah, I'm gonna residence. I'm thinking Linden Street. I live on Linden.
You're all over the place.
Very good.
Good thing my career wasn't subject to that, right?
So I'm going to propose we take 5 minutes or so off camera and just take a break, breathe, process some of this information, and
Certainly.
come back and figure out what we're going to do after. Is that amenable to everybody here?
Well, just to be clear, process mentally, internally, not to discuss.
Not to
Right.
discuss.
Yeah, no
It's
deliberation.
To digest.
Digest. No deliberation, just,
Are we leaving or you're leaving?
we're leaving for taking a 5-minute
Taking a
break.
recess.
Just taking a recess. Thank you. Welcome back, everybody. So, I've been stewing on this, and I have a recommendation, but I'm not the end-all be-all. We have the rest of the board to come up with what they feel appropriate courses of action are. I'm of the mindset to issue a suspension, giving Gary the opportunity to do some more homework, learn more of the rules, sit down one-on-one with other members of conservation to understand what the guidelines and premises behind the Conservation Commission is, and also get the opportunity to sit down with the chairman and vice chairman of conservation to understand their thoughts and feelings and ideas regarding how to best educate new members on what's acceptable and what's not acceptable behavior for members of the board. Dang it.
Matt,
That's kind of where my head's at.
how long of a suspension?
I would probably be looking at I would say 2 weeks to a month. So you'd miss
We
two
meet
meetings.
again in a certain time, so maybe have me skip a meeting or something like that?
Probably 1 or 2 meetings that you would be suspended for, yes.
At first blush, I don't think the Conservation Commission's the right post. I think, and I agree, and I believe you earnestly want Douglas to be the great place, and certainly it's home for you, and there's great pride there. But the demeanor, the threat of $100 a day for something right out of the gate just shows poor judgment to me. I think cultural council involvement where there isn't the natural hesitancy or concern that residents have about an agent of the town, which is what you are, coming on my property in any way, whether it be with 3 members, 4 members, or a scheduled site visit. It's a concern to me.
Do I address that?
No, not yet. I would love your energy and excitement to continue in the capacity, but I don't know if it's on conservation.
Could I address that, Mr. Morse, or?
You can?
I just don't know what your policy is here, so I don't want to just jump in without your approval. I guess I would take issue to that because the whole thing was tongue-in-cheek the whole time. Yeah, you might deserve a $100 a day fine or something like that. I'm going to give a $100 a day fine to somebody who has a dock that's in the water. The guy off Southwest Main Street that filled in wetlands, their own board gave a $100 fine for that. He filled them in without a permit. Nothing. $100. So, for me to say, you're getting a $100, that's not the way it happened. There's a picture being painted here of the Mona Lisa. Okay? And the Mona Lisa underneath it is really a clown or something else. This is not rising to a level, I think, of anything beyond a suspension, giving me the tools to do my job right. I have 20 or 30 years in an excavator putting in these culverts, putting in replication, putting in retaining ponds, detaining ponds, all these things. I mean, I have a area of expertise as well as the Cultural Council that could help the town as a volunteer. So I would challenge that if you insisted on going that way, because I don't think it's necessary.
It's one of the reasons why I intend to have Tracy and Mike.
This has been, honestly, we've had 1 meeting, all right? And when we appointed you, you scoffed at us and said, we'll see how long this lasts.
Right? I don't want to say that was scoffed.
Whatever you want to call it. My concern really is the efficiency of government. Is the Conservation Commission, as it's currently constituted, is it acceptable to you?
Absolutely.
All right, so the first act you did as a volunteer new member was nominate yourself for chairman and then vice chairman.
Absolutely.
For what purpose?
What purpose? For what purpose? So that I could help run the flow of things, like a basketball game. Whoever wins the basketball game is usually the one who runs the flow or manages the flow. So I could help let people like myself talk for longer than 6 minutes allotted to them after waiting for 2 months' time. I don't think that that's anything other than confident. I mean, you can call it anything else. And as a matter of fact, if you watch that to the end, I told Tracy, I'm glad you guys didn't vote me into that, because this is crazy amount of work. She's brilliant. I mean, she's right for the job. So,
Some comments.
You can.
I see a lot of things here that trouble me, and I think one of the things I don't think that you grasp, perception is reality. Your intentions, you tell us, were honorable, but the results of those intentions speak differently. We have people here complaining, and this is not the only complaint. We've discussed that at length tonight.
But have you had-
So while you may think in your mind that your acts were proper and that you were speaking flippantly or trying to make a joke, you should have been aware of the fact that it would not be received that way by somebody else, and it certainly wasn't received. And I'm not saying that it was meant as a joke or anything like that, but if that's your defense, I think you should have been aware that it was received. I've heard a lot tonight, and to be frank, mostly from you, that really concerns me. You talk about, you think you were elected to undo 20 years of holy terror. I don't know where you get that idea. It was not from this board. There was no discussion. And let me finish, sir. You've spoken. Please let me finish, okay? You've spoken that in the past, the previous board, the same board, has given you misery. You have talked about the fact, and it's been discussed, how far out of your lane you've been as far as a Conservation Committee member, talking about different things that have absolutely nothing to do. You have some training in real estate, that's great, that's wonderful. You talk about material defects. From my point of view, it doesn't have anything to do with your duties as a Conservation Committee member. And I think you have real serious difficulty understanding what it is that you're supposed to do. I think that from what I've heard, I get the impression here tonight, that you think you're on basically a quest to clean things up. And that wasn't, I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, and Hal's not here, that wasn't our intention in appointing you to a vacant position.
sure. What was your intention?
Filling a vacant position, sir.
With what?
With a person who volunteered. We talk about this all the time. We talk about it at town meeting twice a year. We lack volunteers to fill these positions. Nobody discussed, and I'm not aware, I've only been on this board for a little more than 3 years. I haven't heard of any problems on the Conservation Commission. I've never heard of a problem like this with any volunteer. That in and of itself should tell you something.
It tells me that you don't know what I know. But that's not an offensive thing. It's just like...
I don't think my point is getting through.
Okay, well, the thing is, as far as the dock goes, they all voted for it. 3 out of 4 or 4 out of 4, we all voted on it. I made a motion, and it was carried. So that board, we have very divergent ways of doing business, theology, ideology, however you want to describe it. Now, I made a comment to you when I heard from, the peanut gallery that, where does this guy come from? Well, the fact is, this town is split by partisan politics, whether it's conservative and liberal, and I won't go down that rabbit hole with you. I'll just tell you that some people are going to enjoy the decision made by conservation, not just by me. I don't have that power to make a decision. I have a power to be 1 out of 4. Some people are going to be happy with it and some aren't.
I see absolutely nothing in partisan politics, party politics, conservative versus liberal, or anywhere in between, that bears even slightly on our discussion here tonight.
Well, I have a problem with being tangential, so for that I apologize.
I'm all set, thank you.
You good?
Yep.
Mr. Hughes? You're the only one I haven't heard from tonight.
Well, thank you for asking, Mr. Chairman. I'm kind of in agreement with Dave. I think what concerns me more is sort of some of the answers to the questions that Dave has asked and the other board members have asked. And I'm concerned when you think it's okay to speak to somebody that you don't know in a tongue-in-cheek manner and think that that's going to be received in the way that you're intending it to be received. I was always taught to be professional and respectful, and I see nothing professional or respectful at all about that type of interaction.
How about my behavior here tonight? Has it been respectful?
It has been respectful.
So what I'd like to say, Mr. Hughes, is that living in this town for all this time, and I agree the whole townie versus newbie thing is baloney, but I'm a townie to guys who've been here for 50 years. Kevin's a townie to someone who might have been here 10 or 20 years, or however length he is. So it's arbitrary. It's all in good fun. I don't like the word newbie, and I won't use it because it's, problematic. Having said that, I'm a grown-up, and I can act like a grown-up. You know, in Douglas and in New England, we say things tongue-in-cheek. It's not to be received poorly. I understand what your concerns are, but here's how a person addressed me today privately. Called me up and said, you know, you've got some issues. I watched that tape. You've got to act more professional. That's why I came in long pants and shoes, and I was even going to buy a tie. You know why I didn't bring a tie? Because I thought you guys would think that I was overdoing it and trying to get in. You know, we live in a politically correct world that I want no part of, but I can act respectful and I can do this job well. You know, if you kick me off this board, I will challenge it, but I will say that I will respect you for leaving me in place, and I would accept the 2 weeks suspension or the first meeting suspension without challenging it. But I've already talked to ACLU. I've talked to local people. You know, if you fire me from the board, I'd have to resist it because I think I'm right. I'm perfect. I'm not perfect. I mean, I say some crazy things, but it's not meant to be hurtful. It's the
Well, I think the interactions, to me, are a problem. I find it, you know, a big problem to show up at somebody's property unannounced.
Well, that was a perfectly innocent mistake.
Well, it happened twice. It happened on Perry Street, and
Okay,
the
so
police
those-
were called on you,
Sure.
and then you proceeded to do it again,
Well, I didn't do it an hour later. I mean, it might have been the next day or whatever.
but you did it again.
I don't know that I did it after the thing. I mean, the timing is a little, you know.
I mean, I don't disagree with what the points that are coming up. I mean, the behavior and things like that, they're questionable. That's the easiest way to explain it.
I think it shows poor judgment. You know, I think what was written on Dynamic Douglas
But I mean, out
shows
of
poor judgment.
mine
And I
have-
have concerns, somebody representing the town on a town board.
I agree.
That shows that
Well,
kind of judgment.
that's not fair, Mr. Hughes, because, you know, Mr. Morris is one of the moderators for that and administrators, and it's not fair that somebody else could have a say, but I can't. I mean,
With your permission, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to specifically instruct the board not to take into consideration anything that the gentleman has posted on social media.
That's fair.
Thank you.
That's fair.
Understood.
Having said that, there's, state law is abundantly clear, as we preface this meeting, you know, with the announcement that ultimately all appointed committee members serve at the pleasure of the Board of Selectmen.
but Mr. Bonin, what about when I'm at the carnival with my kids? Am I representing the Town Conservation Commission at that time? I'm on a free speech board where 3,600 people are part of the town that are expressing opinions. I mean, I brought up something that someone took offense to, and I'm happy to read a letter or leave it go. But
And I withdraw that concern based on,
Thank you.
Yeah.
so I will leave that out of any of my thinking and decision-making.
thank you.
My thought process is on this is that we've heard from the residents that had the issue. We've heard from Gary. You know, Nick was kind enough to bring in the police report that came in under the other call. We've got that evidence that's sitting in front of us.
Mr. Morris, could you let the public know what was the result of that?
So the narrative is that resident called stating a vehicle faltered into her driveway at the location. Stated there was a person in the vehicle representing the Douglas Conservation Commission, and they were trying to lock this location.
I think they meant walk, probably.
Yeah. Dispatch spoke to the person, stated he was advising of their upcoming conservation appointment. That's what I have under
Just the date and time of that, Mr. Chairman, if it's in there.
8/2/2018.
And I think it's important to note that in that docket,
Am I right? Yeah, 8/2.
in that,
These folks complain.
Yeah.
And it appears that the call
8/6.
came in at 8:02 PM,
On what date?
2002. 8/2, August 2nd.
August 2nd, and your visit was on August 6th, is that correct?
August 4th, so 2 days later. So I guess my point that I was alluding to was out of respect, I'd like to hear from the chairman of conservation and have them weigh in on a final determination as to what we do. It's their board. I mean, yes, we appoint them, but they do run with a certain amount of autonomy. So I just feel it's more respectful to say, how does the chairman and vice chairman of conservation feel about the behavior of Gary? What do they feel appropriate follow-up would be?
Okay, so can I make a suggestion?
Sure.
We don't need to make a decision tonight, but we can schedule a public hearing if so requested. And it sounds like that's what will be requested.
Only if requesting a public hearing, sir.
No, I would make a
These are more-
suggestion myself, if you don't mind, Mr. Morse. I would suggest the board issue me a 2-week or 1 or 2 meeting suspension, subject to Tracy Sharkey and Mike, I think. Greco weighing in. And as far as I'm concerned, Katie Grace. I mean, we all have to work together. But you make a decision that the suspension goes according to after a conversation with them takes place. Because to have another public meeting and have her come in, then I don't think that that's beneficial. That's just an opinion.
I think it would be a temporary
Okay,
suspension.
what Mr. Bowen has to say.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Hughes. I'm asking this question solely for purposes of making sure that we have a clear procedural path. I understand that you are offering a plea in return for a particular result, and that you're offering it for that purpose only. However, we have to look at the statute. The board can act tonight and act as it deems appropriate. If that action results in a removal, and I don't know what is going to happen, the statute provides that you have the right to a public hearing. And so the question for you right now is, do you wish to have a public hearing in addition to what's happening tonight?
If I receive a suspension, I don't request a public hearing. No, I'll accept that.
All right, well, let's make this very pointed then. If the board votes to remove you, do you request a public hearing on that removal?
Could I ask why that answer is important now?
Can I ask why you won't answer it?
I'll answer it.
Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, if you vote to remove me, I'll challenge it. I will have the ACLU represent me, or I'll ask you to pay for my attorney as the fact that I will be, until I'm removed, under the auspices of the protection of the town of Douglas and its attorneys as a Conservation Commission member.
Well, let me ask the question to you one more time. If this board votes to remove you tonight, do you now request a public hearing concerning that removal? Regardless of who represents you,
sure.
regardless of how many dollars you think you may get out of the town.
Oh, no, it's not about that.
Answer the...
Well, I take exception to that first.
Sir,
I take exception to that.
Answer the question. If you are removed by this board tonight, do you request a public hearing before this board?
Let's say I request it. Can I, at some point, say, I'll skip it and we'll just let the thing drop? Or does the hearing have to take place no matter what?
You
I
can,
can't address a hypothetical.
Okay,
I would assume if he doesn't show up to a public hearing, it's null and void.
yeah.
Well,
But we have it without him representation.
I think we need an answer to the question before we move any farther.
Yeah.
The statute requires that, he's entitled to it, and I think, Mr. Bowen has asked a number of times.
Okay, so yeah, I would request, if you vote to remove me, I'll request a public hearing. And I just want to take exception to the point that this gentleman suggested that I would benefit monetarily. I don't know where that's coming from.
Well, I think my words will speak for themselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moore.
Fair enough.
Mr. Morse, could I just say one thing?
Sure.
I think the situation needs to de-escalate before it escalates. I mean, that's my feeling. I mean, there's talk of division because of Proposition 2.5, the thing with the library, a lot of unhappy people in town. I personally don't have any information on either one of those subjects because They weren't on my radar. I was busy doing other things. I just wasn't paying attention. So the town is being split apart in some factions, whether you think it's partisan or not. I would want this to get easier before it gets harder. In other words, yeah, I just said it. If you kick me off the board, I'm going to want a hearing. I'm going to have 50 people here in support of me who dealt with the previous boards and say, hey, you know what? This guy's not out talking from left field. I mean, you guys don't have that experience of being on the other side of Conservation Board. I do. I've made case law in the town of Uxbridge, Coopertown Realty Trust versus town of Uxbridge. I've had superseding order of conditions that I've won. I've won defeats of superseding order conditions and went up one more level in the DEP and won that. I went up another level and got denied and won that. I mean, this is what I've done. This is my skill set. But I don't want to go there. I want to be a good conservation member and learn from what you guys are trying to teach me. I mean, I feel like I'd like to read this letter, but I'll only do it if you invite me to. If you don't, then I put myself at the mercy of the board. But I feel like I almost should, and I'll ask for 5 more minutes, and then you have the last word, and I won't say another thing.
How do you feel?
On which subject?
He'd like to read his letter. I have no problems with him reading a letter. I'd ask for everybody else if they feel about it.
I'm not going to object to it, but I think it might be more appropriate if we ever do get to a public hearing.
Well, I think now's the time for it, respectfully. The thing is, Mr. Bonin, you're trying to, yes or no me off the conservation, and it's important. I'm asking you in this letter, it will succinctly say everything that I've mishmashed up tonight and say, hey, look, this is
I'll
what...
be glad to listen,
Okay, so
listen to your letter. I'm not concerned about that. It's the temperament that's a bother to me.
Well, I take issue with your temperament, which is calm and cool. I mean, I'm a little excitable. So I'd like to read this, if you don't mind.
Please.
Sir, could you email a copy of that to the board so that we can have it for our records?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
And then, I'll stay here as long as you want, or you can have the last word to this letter, and I won't say another word. Gentlemen of the board, it has been suggested around town and here in these town offices that I have brought shame onto the town I love so much in my role as Conservation Commission member. And although sometimes I speak when I should listen and am silent when I should speak occasionally, I take exception to the outright slanderous accusation from several newcomers to this town of Douglas that I am a bigot, a racist, and a disgusting woman-bashing hater of the Chinese race that is worthy of restaurant workers at the downtown Chinese restaurant to spit on my food. I will spare the offensive harbingers of politically correct hokum the shame of being identified in front of their own neighbors and friends as a sign of goodwill and, frankly, class that they lacked in spewing those lazy, hate-filled, vile, shameful words towards me as casually as you might say good morning. I offer this sign of goodwill to these keyboard cowboys this once, and only once. The next time some coward calls me those things, they had better lawyer up, because as a real estate agent, my reputation for being unbiased toward anyone is paramount to success, and I will not sit idly by while those with more time on their hands than common sense and decorum try to derail my efforts to provide for my family. My preferred method of going through life nowadays is to be childlike in my wonder and innocence of life, but not childish, exercising poor judgment and immaturity belying a man of 59 years old, most of which were spent in this town I was born in. To be honest, those that know me, like and even love me, know I fail at that occasionally. For that, I apologize to this board. I will not, however, apologize for saying that if the Chinese restaurant were to be brought out for future expansion of the old grammar school building expansion plan, a use that has not been filled in over 38 years, a plan that I've recently presented briefly to this board, that the Chinese restaurant people would be paid much yen, Y-E-N. A resident of town corrected me on the currency actually being called yuan, Y-U-A-N, and then with great vigor publicly announced on the dynamic Douglas site in front of 3,600 members of my hometown that he hoped they spit in my food if I ever ate there. I won't apologize because I did nothing wrong, period. I think I'm funny, My family and friends think I'm funny. I love to make people laugh and amuse myself in the process. Saying much yen is a witticism or a pun or a quip. Like saying the Italian guy gets paid much lira. It's not racist or bigoted or worthy of having my food spit on. Robin Williams was quoted as saying, "I make people laugh because I know what it's like to feel worthless, and I don't want anyone else to ever feel that way." Well, guess what? I learned that feeling of worthlessness in this town, this building when it was a high school, and this very room from a very large teacher that could be a bit of a bully herself. I'll spare you the details because a half a dozen of those bullies still live in this town, and frankly, because I'm healed from all that by the blood of Jesus Christ. 3 months ago, after 6 weeks of intensive transformational prayer therapy, I was healed of all the damage that these physically abusive individuals who preyed upon the weak as cowardly as these Facebook felons do now, and I carry no hatred toward these people anymore. It took me 45 years of carrying that pain and that shame to finally come out and be gone forever because of Jesus, not because of hiding from school shooters under desks, not calling hate-filled names, not hoping it would go away. Jesus did that for me. He defines me, not you folks or the real haters and cyber bullies in this town. One thing I've learned from being beaten senseless by a bully who had nothing to lose is this: never ever get in a fight with somebody with nothing to lose. My bully was being bullied at home, so he took it out on me. But that's done. It's over. I've forgiven him and the other despoilers of my childhood. But here's the thing. Now I'm the one with nothing to lose. I lost my wife of 19 years because I bullied her. I'll skip the next part. Well, actually, I'll read it. She forgave me to her credit, and after 4 years of divorce, I hope there's still a spark between us, and I'm praying to God, the God of Israel, of Abraham, Jacob, and Joseph, not Baal and Panthea or Wendy the Witch, that he will bring us back together again as a family. I'm almost done. My thinking goes like this. I need this aggravation like I need a hole in the head. You need me more than I need you, in the sense that you need me on that conservation board to level out the playing field and put fair play and common sense back into vogue. And I'll remind you of what happened with the Boy Scout who tried to get a bridge put over wetlands or near wetlands. 20 years of holy terror and self-serving aggrandizement is enough. The window dressing of idiotic lines of edge of work zones is over. I've never voted for another installed shrubbery to demarcate a no-work zone again because it's not serving any purpose. It's not useful. It's window dressing. If you care to remove me from this board, you will have the fight of your life on your hands. I've made cases on Coopertown Realty Trust versus Town of Uxbridge and overturned many a Concom and DEP superseding order of conditions, some here in my own town due to the outrageous behavior of previous sitting boards. This lawsuit of Coopertown versus Town of Uxbridge challenged an unfair bylaw which was refusing to allow me to remove loom from a property I owned. And it was removed by my ace attorney, and a fair bylaw took its place because of me. It's my proudest moment in my 30-year-plus experience speculating real estate in the local area. The Town of Uxbridge spent $30,000 to fight a lost cause. I spent $6,000 to get the win and put everyone on notice that I don't take on lawsuits I can't win, and to leave me alone to exercise my right to quiet and peaceful enjoyment of my property. Now, various people, as I mentioned, the Civil Liberties Union, etc., have been notified of my plight, including Ryan Fatman, and that you are deliberating tonight will be informed of your decision, and I will use their resources to right a wrong, if and when appropriate, or tell them that all is well and it was a simple misunderstanding, or that possibly a suspension was issued. This asinine, politically correct, revenge-driven attempt to make me look small, along with the tiger being painted over and one of the dynamic Douglas Day founders refusing to offer my homeless friend a free vendor's table because rules are rules and lots of people had to scrape up $25, will not stand as long as I'm part of this town, and it's part and parcel of what's wrong with our town. It's our town. 2 more paragraphs and I'm done. The people I just mentioned will weigh in if and when they feel led after tonight's decision by this Board of Selectmen to go forward with ousting me or accepting my specific apology, which is forthcoming. Late arrivals to town, which, by the way, is the faction spewing their nonsensical hate speech towards me, are wreaking havoc on the sensibilities of the townies, and we've had enough. This pseudo-lynching is the last straw and has gotten on my last nerve. This bigoting, telling me I'm a bigot and that kind of stuff. This is not a challenge to your authority. I'm just asking you to exercise the power you have in an intelligent, fair-minded way. I'm asking you to accept my apology of putting this town we all love so much in a bad light, and to go forward in confidence knowing that I can act like a conservation commissioner you can be proud of, and that fair play and common sense will rule the day, and that frankly, I'm human and can make a mistake and have made many, but will try harder on your behalf to not repeat those mistakes. Although you may feel challenged, I ask you to feel enlightened instead. If you feel like you have the right to fire me, essentially, I ask you not to exercise that right. In good faith, since receiving your letter asking me here tonight, I've taken a 1-hour ethics course given to all Massachusetts municipal and volunteer workers, as well as having several conversations with our town administrator and town engineer as to be better equipped to do my job fairly and with great enthusiasm, but not too much enthusiasm. The best compliment I've gotten since being divorced, a divorce I take 99% responsibility for, is that I'm teachable. What more could you ask of me? In conclusion, you may decide amongst yourselves that I deserve judgment. I'm asking you for mercy instead. Thank you.
Thank you. I won't pull punches. I'm still sitting on my, I'd like to talk to Tracy and Mike, and I'm still a big fan of, there's a couple meetings he won't be sitting on. And if it turns into, if you are reinstated and another complaint comes in, there's no arguing, no discussion, no nothing, you'll be gone. Feeling graceful. I give people second chances every now and again.
Could I say something about that?
Sure can.
The only thing I ask you, Mr. Morris, is to take that with the source, and that you can certainly threaten me with being gone, and I accept what you say. Of course, what do you call it, due process would have to take place.
It would.
But I'm just asking you to consider the source, and that maybe someone who calls me a bigot and a racist and spitting on my food might have a different agenda, being that they were part of a property that I sold 5 years ago and are upset that 28 houses are in their backyard.
I get
So
that.
there are
Gary.
things like that. Thank you.
But these folks that came through,
Thank you.
they're not on Dynamic Douglas, and they're not doing those things. I'm talking
take
straight conservation side.
I take your point.
And it's, you know, like I said, people go at things in different manners, in different ways, and I've been in management so long, I look at everything as it's a potential learning opportunity. And I give people the opportunity, I can manage them up, or I can manage them out.
So I'm asking you to manage me up.
So, it's not my decision all alone. I have other members that sit on the board. My personal recommendation that I'm throwing out there is, you're suspended for a couple of meetings. We have follow-up conversations with the chair and vice chair. And we just watch very closely. And if we end up with a rinse and repeat with another thing like this, you'll find very little mercy from me. So, because that's now making me look stupid, and,
Sure.
and I'm not a fan of that.
Yeah.
Conservation was aware of tonight's agenda? Can we assume, or no?
The agenda was properly publicized. Whether other people paid attention, I can't say.
Could I just add something, just procedurally? I would ask that you would maybe ask for 1 month or one meeting, because if one of the others can't make it, then you'll not have a quorum. So I think that I can learn, and if you have other things, other resources you'd like me to read about, as well as the one-time suspension. I won't challenge 2 times, but I'm just asking you to reconsider, maybe go for 1, and maybe some other 20 minutes with Bill Cundiff, 20 minutes with Steve Zist, 20 minutes with Tracy, Mr. Wojcik, any of that stuff. But it's just a suggestion. I won't challenge a 2-meeting suspension.
Mr. Bowen, what are our procedural options from here? A motion and a vote, or general consensus, or?
Well, The gentleman has indicated that if it's a suspension, he's waiving his right to a further hearing and will not challenge that suspension. Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
So, obviously, if that's the chosen path, then you could take a vote to suspend, and I'd recommend a vote, a motion and a vote on some findings as to the appropriateness of the gentleman's conduct. If, on the other hand, the board were to take a vote to remove, then the board should also vote some findings regarding the reasons for that removal. The statute does require that cause be shown, so you would want to have motions that reflected that cause. And then the gentleman has informed you that he will be claiming his statutory right of a public hearing, which means that we would schedule a public hearing at a date to be determined to be convenient for all, whether it would be during the course of a regular selectmen's meeting or whether you would hold a special meeting, and not that I wish to add to anyone's workload, but a special meeting might be the way to go on that. That's what you would have to do. In terms of the scope of the public hearing, we would issue some notice to the gentleman of what the time, date, and place was, what the allegations were. And then at the hearing, well, the gentleman has indicated that he would bring, I think he said 50 or so people in to speak about the past. The actual subject matter of the hearing would be limited to the actual allegations rather than things that may have happened in the past. So I hope that's answered your question.
It does. Thank you, Mr. Bull.
Could I ask a question of the attorney?
I'm going to ask first. The authority to suspend a commissioner falls where? Where do we have the authority to do that?
I think the gentleman has indicated that that is a penalty that he would accept, and in those circumstances, it would stand.
So under town bylaw or state law, there's no specific authority for us to...
There is no specific, the way the statute is written, it talks in terms of not revocation, thank you. Dealing with licenses too many times. It does speak in terms of removal. There is a school of thought that removal means removal, and that's all you've got. There's an older school of thought that took the view that any lesser included action would be allowable within the scope of the ultimate sanction. I think where the gentleman has said that he would accept a suspension, then it wouldn't matter which school of thought we were going under.
Could I ask a couple questions? Or?
Meeting.
Just point of order. It's got nothing to do with the content, just, or a policy. It's a legal question, Mr. Morris.
The board's attorney.
It is the board's attorney.
All right. All right, I'll ask, could I ask you then? And you could ask him? I mean, however you want me to do it, I just have two questions.
I guess my only thing is we've exhausted a lot of this conversation, and I'm certainly not trying to deny you your opportunity to talk to Mr. Bowen.
It's just a question about what happens after your decision, that's all. It'll be very simple.
Make it brief.
Okay. Is the firing, if, I don't know what you call it, if removal. Is the removal appealable?
That's something you'd have to discuss with your own attorney.
Okay. Is, okay, good enough.
Okay.
I think, just for the record, we need to avoid putting Mr. Bowen in a position here. He's the town's attorney, and by extension, the board's attorney. Asking him to give someone who's currently at odds with us advice puts him in an
No, it's
awkward...
advice, it's, okay.
Dave, if I may, just to follow on that, as I discharge my duties, I'm mindful of the fact that I'm the town's attorney. I represent the corporation known as the Town of Douglas, but part of my representation of the corporation known as the Town of Douglas is to assist this board in following process as fairly and fully as possible. I believe that I have fully discharged that duty, and that whatever result you may choose as a result of this process will be fully defensible.
Hey, it's good lawyer talk right there.
It's good to hear. Here's where I am. I think the Conservation Commission's the wrong board for you. I take you at your word about the comment being made in jest, and albeit as distasteful as I found it personally, I take your apology and not making the following statement with that in mind. But I just, conservation naturally has, there's a concern that residents have when Conservation Commission has to come in to do a project that they're spending a fair amount of money on between plans and paying for and architectural designs and permits and what have you. And I believe you can learn how to be a good volunteer. But I think the stakes with conservation and perhaps a couple other boards are too high to learn on the job. But some of these things, I don't know if they'll ever be learned. It might just be who you are.
But everyone learns on that board, on the job.
Sure, I'm learning every day here in this.
Well, why am I any different than you?
Well, the police haven't called me twice in less than a month, for starters.
Well, okay.
I've called them on like 5 times. Calling.
So that's where I am with it.
Does this decision have to be unanimous?
No, majority.
Majority?
I think I agree with you, Tim. I think one of the things that Mr. Bonin said that we were charged to do tonight is determine whether there was enough evidence to warrant removal from the commission. I think there is.
Could you state that evidence?
I think in terms of your interaction with these folks, the fact that you showed up unannounced at least 2 properties, the one on Perry Street and the one there.
Nobody told me not to.
I just think it's common courtesy and common sense to find out when a good time would be to visit somebody at their property.
And you think that I should be dismissed because of that?
I think the fact that, you minimize those interactions and said it was just tongue-in-cheek. If I were interacting with somebody in the capacity of a professional relationship and I didn't know those people, I wouldn't be talking tongue-in-cheek.
So if I was at a McDonald's...
Let me finish.
Okay.
I think there is enough evidence to warrant sort of taking those steps. I've been on the board for 12 years. I'm probably the longest sitting board member. In that 12 years, I have not once had the opportunity to consider removing somebody from a board or a commission.
Well, I've heard
so
different...
for complaints about you to rise to that level is something that doesn't happen frequently in this town.
Sure.
In fact, it's never happened in the 12 years that I've been on the board.
Well, I stand by...
That being said, if you'd let me finish.
Sure, I will.
I would be willing to consider Kevin's proposal with the strong recommendation to this board that if we do get another complaint, I will not hesitate to vote to remove you from the commission and follow due process and have your hearing. But, I think I could go along, thank you, Mr. Bonin, with Kevin's suggestion to give you a second chance, but not a third chance.
I would say I've heard more than enough here tonight that would warrant removal. It begins with the complaints and the testimony I heard from the Bagdis family. It only escalates and gets worse from there, from your own words, sir. You did nothing tonight to help yourself, and that's my opinion. The statements you made indicate to me, and I stated this before, that you think you have some kind of mission or duty to be on that board to change everything or the commission, I should say, for some perceived past wrongs. Even if there were some, which I'm not aware of, that's not why you're there. You're there to act as a regular commissioner or a regular member of that board. I think you've acted far out of the scope of that. And I think your interaction with these people and with others and with us tonight is ample evidence to me that you should not be a representative of this town. I would not hesitate to vote for your removal, and I'm being very honest and looking directly at you as I say it. No one has made a motion yet, and thus I haven't made up my mind as to what to do. But I think there is far more than ample evidence here to warrant your removal. I've heard a lot of talk about divisions and different groups and different things. I don't know whether you meant these as a smokescreen or whether you really believe this. None of those things have anything to do with why we're here tonight. We're here tonight because we received complaints, the town officials that seated here today, received complaints about your behavior while you were discharging your duties as an appointed member of a commission. It has nothing to do with how long anyone lived in town. It has nothing to do with which way they voted. It has nothing to do with whether they supported an override or the library or anything else. It has to do with complaints about your conduct as a town official.
And I don't disagree with what you said.
Thank you.
Mr. Morris, could I say something?
Go ahead.
Mr. Hughes, I appreciate your level-headedness and your willingness to maybe see the other side of it. All I wanted to say is to you and Mr. Morris is the fact that you've just told 8,600 people who live in town that if they make a complaint against me, that I'm going to be thrown out. So I just wanted to make that point.
Well, it would be a complaint that was warranted, that there was evidence to
Thank you.
support that complaint.
Thank you.
Not just somebody, making allegations.
That's all I'm concerned with. Thank you.
No, and I understand that. That's the case.
Here's the long story short, is like, we've hashed this over. So there's two schools of thought on it. There's two opportunities. Somebody needs to make a motion one way or the other.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that we didn't have an opportunity to hear from at least the chairman of the Conservation Commission.
That's the
And to get her input on
that's the biggest thing that I wanted tonight.
because that probably could have swayed me in either direction, because I'm quite frankly sort of in agreement with what David's saying.
I make a request then to propose to either make a decision to suspend upon hearing from her, or Mr. Morris?
Yeah.
Or I ask for an extension of this hearing to have Tracy speak publicly. I'm confident that we can get along, Tracy and I and the other board members, so.
Well, would it be an option?
To be clear, this
suspend?
isn't a hearing.
I know.
None of this has been a public hearing, so it's not a matter of trying to continue anything. It's a matter of we can defer what action we choose to take to a follow-up meeting pending when we talk to Tracy and Mike. Or we choose to take what's sitting in front of us and take some course of action, be it suspension or removal, and then face a public hearing afterwards.
So
Mike?
could we suspend indefinitely pending future discussion with the Conservation Chairman?
To your permission, Mr. Chairman, to Selectmen Hughes, Mike, absolutely, you could just table this until such time as either the chairman puts it back on the agenda or it gets back on the agenda in the normal fashion that things get on the agenda. You're not compelled to act tonight. As several members have pointed out, this is not a hearing. This is just the time to figure out whether it's warranted in removing the gentleman, which then, should he claim a hearing, which he said he will, elevates it to another higher, stricter process.
Okay, so let me just be a little clearer. Can we suspend pending giving us time to make a final decision on removal?
Michael?
And with that period of time, gathering additional information from, say, the chairman of the Conservation
With
Commission?
your permission, Cal?
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman.
Please.
Would you object to that, sir?
What's that?
Selectmen
suspending
uses-
you indefinitely, giving us an opportunity to speak with the Conservation Commission
I don't,
chairman.
I don't particularly care for that, but what I'd like to volunteer is to remove myself for the next 2 meetings, unless there's a quorum and I'm required, but to step down as part of a suspension for 2 meetings.
In view of that answer, I don't recommend,
I was planning on, my thought process is to throw a motion out that this be on our first meeting in September's agenda, with the request of having the chairman and vice chairman of conservation present as an official agenda item.
And my concern is in that interim,
Right.
he will be still sitting on the, Gary will still be on the
Well, here's the
Conservation
thing.
Commission.
In the
And I do
interim,
not feel comfortable having him sit there pending
Mr.
our
Hughes,
final
if you
decision.
ask me not to, I won't go until that meeting. I won't do anything until the next meeting publicly.
So I guess that was my question. Can we suspend pending a final decision on removal?
if the gentleman agrees to it, yes.
Well, now it's getting a little convoluted, so if I could...
No, it's not convoluted. It's yes or no. If you agree to it, the answer is yes. If you say no, the answer is no.
So what is the
Simple
specific
as that.
question?
Can we suspend, would you agree to a suspension pending our final decision, giving us an opportunity to have another meeting that we invite the Conservation Commission chairman to?
Yes. I agree.
okay. So
I
you
want to
will,
clarify Mr. Hughes' statement. You understand that you're suspended as a member of that commission. You exercise no duties, you don't identify yourself, and you don't attend meetings.
Yes, sir.
okay.
Until we make our final decision.
Well, there hasn't been a motion yet.
Well,
Right.
No, I just want, I'm just asking
But
his
at some
opinion.
point, I'd like this to be a discussion amongst the board members, right? I think that's just passing the buck entirely. You're gonna ask two commissioners to come in on public TV and make the decision for you. I think the facts are very clear
Well,
here.
it's 2 commissioners and it's their board, when you get right down to it. Yes, we appoint them, but it's their board.
But it's
You
our
wouldn't
responsibility, and
feel,
when the complaints come, who do they come
But
to?
I'm not asking them to make the decision, I'm just asking.
we'd
to
like their
hear
input. Would you, I
Their
mean,
input.
you look at it like this, if for some reason there was another board or agency that came in that said, I don't like the way Bonin's tie looks, I want him off the Board of Selectmen. Wouldn't you want the board to have a say over that?
See, I think I'm capable of making my own decision, and I'm not expecting somebody else to come in
To me,
and
it's
sort of
more
take
of
that
a professional
responsibility
courtesy.
away.
It is their board.
I just think that, you know, if we
I'd
were
like to
con-
say something when you get a chance.
So, I mean, I'll be honest, Gary, I've, one way or the other, this is gonna turn into multiple meetings. We can choose to remove them tonight, it's gonna be a hearing, there's gonna be another meeting that comes behind it.
Am I removed, though, if you choose that tonight? I thought I wasn't removed until you had a hearing.
So if this board puts a motion in front of us, let's say it's Mr. Cortez or Mr. Bonin or Mr. Hughes that puts a motion and it meets by a majority vote that he is removed from the board, that is effective immediately. Is that correct or incorrect?
It's effective immediately until such time as he, not suggested in writing, requests a hearing. When he requests a hearing,
He's then reinstated?
he's reinstated because the removal was not effective. So my suggestion would be that if the board is contemplating a removal vote, that the date of removal be set 2 weeks out so that the gentleman has an opportunity to claim his right of appeal and then immediately set up a date for the hearing.
Well, I'm here to entertain a motion either way that it goes, because I'll be honest, I'm done discussing it tonight.
Right.
I mean, I've heard from you, Gary, I've heard from you folks. We seem to be at a relative impasse or sticking point here to satisfy conscience. Either way, this is going to turn into a 2-meeting agenda. It's going to turn into, we remove him tonight, he appeals it, we go to a public meeting, it's going to be right back on our agenda, or we choose to suspend him pending what we can hear from Tracy and Mike, which then again, he'll end up in another meeting anyway.
As opposed, Mr. Chairman, to a 3-meeting agenda.
Yeah.
Because if we wait to and hear from the leadership of the Conservation Commission and allow them to weigh in, if at that point, hypothetically, we would vote for removal, he still has the right to a public hearing and he'll likely exercise
You're
it.
absolutely right.
And I do have one question as well.
one second. I would think that if the Board of Selectmen offers to remove you, or basically based off of a conversation with the remaining members of your board that say we don't want him here, I don't imagine people would really want to fight that. If your board doesn't want you there, and the residents don't want you there because they don't feel it's the right fit, I don't see why you'd continue to fight it, but that's up to you.
I mean, that's,
And you're-
he has the right to do as he chooses within the law, and I don't think that, speaking personally, that's none of my concern, what Mr. Vecchione chooses to do. I don't mean you any disrespect. You're there and you have rights and you can do what you want to do,
I
and
actually
that's
think
fine.
they
I
would
don't think
support-
we should base our decisions on what he may or may not do.
Okay.
He has the rights to do what he chooses to do.
Mr. Morris, I feel like it's important that you do hear from Tracy and Katie Grace and from Mike, because I do work with them, and we are a four-member board. If they feel like they can attest to my misbehavior as rising to the level of being dismissed, you're right. Why would I want to stay on a board where I'm hated? Right?
And that could occur at a public hearing. And I'd remind the rest of the members that we're here tonight, not because of his interaction with other members of the board. We're here tonight, the majority of the evidence we've heard has to do with his interaction with members of the public that we all serve.
And I feel like that I'm going to win that fight, because my interactions with them, whether they're supercilious or as mature as, a professor at college, I don't think I did anything wrong. For the stuff that may have put you in a bad light, I've apologized for. I've asked for your forgiveness. I've received it from Mr. Cortez. And so whatever your decision is, I'll act accordingly. But I will say that I'd like a question answered, if possible. Because I am representative of the town and a conservation member, am I entitled to legal services from the town that they pay for?
I'd be happy to answer that.
Okay.
With great glee, I can tell.
And I'm going to apologize for being a little longer than I'd like to be. Sir, there are very few occasions on which you are entitled to go on private property. You are not entitled to go on private property unless you have the specific consent of the property owner, or unless you have an administrative search warrant issued by the district court. If you do not have either of those two things, you have no right to be on private property, and the corporation known as the Town of Douglas will not defend you for your actions taken without lawful authority.
I didn't think that was on, for the record.
I just have a question to that. Does Mass state law say that you have to be warned once before you are committed a trespass?
Sir, I recommend that you consult with your own attorney.
All right. All right, so we're done with People's Court. I'm looking to entertain a motion.
All right, I make a motion that we remove Mr.
Second.
What did you say?
I make a motion that we remove.
Remove?
Second.
The motion was made by Mike. It was seconded by Dave. Is there any further discussion on this matter? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Done.
Fine.
Now, do I need
We do
legal
those after the
counsel
vote? Is that
from
correct?
this point forward to make my appeal to the public hearing, or how does that work?
Who does that, the chairman, or can each board member do one, or?
I would offer them in the form of a motion for the board's vote.
What was that?
Findings.
Findings. Findings of fact.
Yes. For example,
Yeah, give us some recommendations of how to do this procedurally.
I move to find that a member of the Conservation Commission should act in a professional manner. That is a finding.
Okay.
And you could say so moved and seconded and vote. I move to find that Mr. Vecchione did not meet the standard of conduct which we expect. I move to find that the testimony offered tonight under oath by the complainants was credible. I move to find that it was not proper for Mr. Vecchione to, within the space of August 2nd to August 4th, enter onto private property or conduct site investigations in a manner that led to complaints to the police department.
Excuse me.
And so forth.
Okay. All right.
Okay. So is this matter complete?
Well, we have to make findings.
Yeah.
That's-
And so
yeah.
moved to those.
So I do
so
have a-
move to those.
I do have a question, too.
I would second all of those.
All right. So made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 I have a question.
Yes.
I thought I was brought in here to see if you were going to have a hearing to make the decision you just made. Did I misunderstand that?
So the agenda item is potential removal vote Conservation Commission member. So you have the right to a hearing moving point at this,
Hearing, right?
Yeah.
to a public hearing.
With your permission, Mr. Chairman, what will
Yes.
happen next is that presumably when Suzanne comes back, a letter will be prepared to Mr. Vecchione, which will state the action that you took, will list the motions that were taken, copies of the complaints which were offered will be attached to that document, as long as any other documents that you chose to take administrative notice of tonight. Those will go to Mr. Vecchione, and then Mr. Vecchione, in consultation with his lawyer, will decide whether and when to file a claim of a public hearing, and should that claim of a public hearing come forward, at that point, I'm sure you will consult with me as to the timing of an
Certainly
appropriate
will.
hearing.
Question, point of order on that, is that once I file that request for hearing, from what I understood earlier, I'm reinstated. Is that right?
I believe that's right. Upon filing, he's reinstated on
Yes.
conservation.
So I'll wait for the paperwork from Suzanne. Can you say in good faith how long you would need, or how long it would take for that to come to me?
Suzanne's out this week, right? Vacation?
She's due back Monday. So if she were to process things efficiently, and you were to get it efficiently, it'd be Wednesday or Thursday by the time you get it.
So in essence, just an overview, I'm suspended effective immediately, no activities, no representations that I'm part of the Conservation Commission in any sort of active work, but once I apply for my hearing, I'm reinstated.
Correct.
Well, with your permission, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
No, sir, you are removed until such time as you claim a right of a public hearing.
Sure.
You are not a member of the Conservation Commission.
I understand.
And should you claim a public hearing, and please, sir, I mean this very sincerely, I hope you paid particular attention to my remarks about unauthorized exercise of power. I meant them for your benefit.
Thank you.
And I'm sure you can get more information from your attorney.
Well, I won't be represented right away unless it's by the ACLU, but I can deal with that later. So I'm removed, I'm not a member. When I request my hearing, I'm reinstated, I can act as commissioner, but stay off people's property, go to meetings, etc.
I believe that's the case, right, Rich?
And it would be wise, and I can't offer any specifics, it would be wise to act solely within the scope of your authority.
Absolutely. If nothing else, I've taken that from this meeting.
And then, based upon the results of the public hearing, whatever the findings are, the removal would then be deemed permanent or overturned.
And Mr. Chairman, with your indulgence, I just want to say that this is very different from going into McDonald's. I think that was the analogy used in expressing your opinion. There are different kinds of town officials, and not just when people think in terms of good and bad town officials. We're talking about officials who make policy. We're also talking about officials who have enforcement capabilities. And officials that act in an enforcement capacity are held to a very high standard. It is very troubling to the private citizen to have an enforcement official appear on their private property unannounced without benefit of permission or a warrant. And so that's why being on an enforcement board is
Sure.
a very serious matter.
Sure.
So
And I appreciate...
please take that advice into account as you go forward.
Absolutely will, and I appreciate you for it. I will say that I was a guy who have brought police with me or asked the conservation of this very town to bring police with them because they were, overstepping their authority. So the only thing I'd end with, and please have the last word, is that the decision I made concerning the Bagneses will stand up in court because I was right. We'll see how that plays out, but I'm not ashamed of that decision in any way.
Yes, sir, that decision isn't the subject of this hearing.
Well, we are before the town, so I just wanted to make that point.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
All right. I stole your pen. So we're moving on to item number 7, minutes of the August 7th, 2018, regular and executive session minutes, which I'm going to abstain from anything on that. I was not present.
I would make a motion that we would approve both sets of minutes and retain the executive session minutes.
And I'll second that motion.
Made by Dave, seconded by Mike. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm abstaining. At long last, Matt. Thank you. Thank you very
Thank you,
much,
folks.
folks. Sorry it took so long. Your administrator's report.
I'll run through this as quickly as I can to switch gears a little bit. I realize this isn't must-see TV for everybody at home in Douglas, but there may be some.
Speak for yourself.
Public meetings, I should say public meetings in general may not have the subscription that we think they do because the camera's on. But we are subject to overnight and through the early morning up to lunchtime tomorrow, severe weather warnings from the National Weather Service. I would ask anyone if we have the kind of mishap that we had when the tornado came down, and there is some twisting in the atmosphere that's reported. Please call 911, not highway. Reach the people that can help you and give them as much information as you can by being safe. Don't go outside if power lines are down, but try to really, you are the only source of information that the town's emergency responders have when things like that happen. So try to, really share as much information as you can. What street you're on, where you think it's closed out, and what help you need. And if you have a neighbor who's, not completely ambulatory and probably needs a wellness check, that would be something to bring to the dispatcher's attention to if we have a road closure or power outage as a result of any severe weather. It's a marginal risk, but I thought I'd bring it up. It's a learning from the last time. Number 2 on my list is we had volunteers from the River Church and Children's Haven do a wonderful job of painting dugouts and sprucing up Martin Road Park. So the park's come along pretty nicely. We've had money in the budget to put proper safety mulch down on the playground for the first time in 20 years. And now these volunteers have done a nice job of making the park look good. So that's, the message we're sending is that we'll work with volunteers to make the town a beautiful place to live and to enjoy sports outside, and that's something that we'll continue to do. Thirdly, I know I'm not the only one who feels this way, but I want to thank the folks who organized the Dynamic Douglas Day, to try to bring the community back together with some community activity and some lighthearted fun. It's a wonderful thing that people stepped forward and did that. I regret I wasn't able to attend. I had a family wedding that's been on the calendar forever, and so that's where I had to be, but I really want to thank those folks for doing that. Item number 4, the police chief has a quick announcement about the safe zone that's been created outside.
Yeah, you guys may have seen, we put it out there on the Facebook, and Suzanne put it on the town's website. We finally got the safety exchange zone out in the parking lot. We have a couple reserved parking spots where people, if they do business on the internet or have a custody exchange, whatever it might be, they have a safe place that they can meet. And this has been in the working for probably the last year and a half. It's just been a matter of getting the parking spots situated, figuring out where we're going to put it. We added a couple cameras to our surveillance system, so our security guy Yep, it's right out front. There's 2 signs. John and Adam painted the parking spots last week, and they erected the sign, so they took care of that for us. So it's up and running, it's monitored 24/7 by dispatch, and everything's recorded. So if anybody has anything, any business they want to do on the internet or when they do their custody exchanges, it's a perfect spot.
It's a great idea. Excellent.
Nice work, Chief.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for your patience tonight.
We're in mid-August now. I just want to remind the community that Chapter 90 funds will be expended before winter, and there will be some roadway paving. There'll certainly be quite a bit of crack sealing that's going to be done between now and the first freeze. So be on the lookout for that. We'll have specific details to announce during the month of September at Selectmen meetings. I know for a fact that one of the roadways that will be improved is Wallem Lake Road. There's been some pretty significant blowouts there, and there's some work that will be done there with a substantial amount of the paving money.
As road commissioners, do we have a say in any of that?
I'm not sure where you begin and end as road commissioners. I think the habit has been, so I've gone along with it, that the highway superintendent allocates those funds on a planned basis. He's got a list of streets that he's identified are in the most need, and I think both places where the work's going to be done is about 2,800 running feet, and that chews up most of the budget.
Yeah, we don't have
No, we can't do
many options. I'm not looking for my street or my driveway, but there are some areas actually that residents have approached me about, and knowing we didn't have money, it was kind of a lot of lip service and duck and move. But
there's been so much bridge work done in Douglas that needed to be done. But now I think we'll be back in business, and I think any feedback you get from residents is very welcome. So if you want to summarize it or just leave me a phone message, I'll make sure that John gets all the information, and I'll add to the list of things he's thinking about. I mentioned to him when we were going around Memorial Day for various veterans observances that the road next to the cemetery here in the village is really awful. It's a terrible place to try to run a plow. So we may not completely rebuild the road, but we might be able to resurface it in future, near future. But those are the kinds of things that we just got to rise to the level of public discussion and have the conversation.
One concern, speaking of roads, that was brought up to me by a resident, Manchog Road out to its Sutton was recently resurfaced, courtesy of the state, state tax dollars at work. When you go into Sutton, there are white fog lines at the side of the road, and they stop exactly at the Sutton-Douglas town line. I just wonder what was the reasoning behind that, if we know. It was nothing the town did. It had nothing to do with the town. Obviously, it was a state job front to back. I don't know if Adam or John would have any insight into that, just so that I could report back and say that there was a reason, it wasn't completely arbitrary.
Okay.
so Sutton got
Maybe the engineer was from Sutton, right? Yeah, exactly.
Sutton got them, but we didn't.
Exactly, yeah.
Foiled again.
Item number 6, if you really must-see TV, we had a long presentation the other night before the Building Facilities Committee of all of the streetlight design that was done for the 400 some odd lights in town. It's more detailed than anybody may ever want to know. I know why the consultant goes into that level of detail. You won't make this decision again for another 30, 40 years. So, and there's a substantial expense associated with the purchase and the operation of streetlights. So that's why he does his homework like that, if you care to watch it. I think what the average citizen will notice, and again, this project will be done before the winter, is that LED lights are substantially brighter on the spot where they're focused than existing lights. And the space between lights is darker. And LED lights bring out true colors. So you'll actually see a green car is green and not a hazy bluish gray. There will be 6 locations in town. I just wanted to emphasize this. We do have the opportunity at this specific point to change the design. Now, there are 6 places where extra bright lights have been considered. I hope I'm going to remember them all accurately. Gilboa and North, North and Main, the strange split at Northeast Main, Davis and Main, and then several right here in the downtown area, several crossroads, including, I believe, Depot Street, meet Main Street. So if you can think of, before the end of the week, any other intersection where you've noticed that visibility is extremely difficult and you'd like to see a little bit more public safety, just shoot me an email and we'll get it to the designer. It doesn't fundamentally change the expense. Again, the guy's brilliant about the details, and it looks like we're going to be substantially under our original estimate for the cost because he's found ways to configure this that save us money. So
Brilliant.
it's good stuff. Lastly, from my perspective, on September 13th, at 7 p.m., the Economic Development Commission is involved in an economic development planning process. And one of the first things they want to do is really kind of open it up to the community and try to find out what are the obstacles, what are your concerns, why, if you perceive it to be difficult to do business in town, why would that be so? And the opposite, if you think the town is attractive, what do you think the strengths of the town are that we carry into the process? That is being driven by the Economic Development Commission. I think they're doing good work. I've thought about this. I don't know that it's wise for the town administrator to attend. I think if people want to open up and have a conversation about department heads and different, they should just be able to have that conversation without pushback or feeling that the presence of that person's boss in the room will change what they say. It's just so everybody knows, when any complaint or concern is raised, it'll be addressed on its merits. But if you're not open and honest about how you feel about things, we can't do anything about it. So it would be very helpful for people to participate in the process, not be offended that I'm not going to be, physically present. I'm going to resist the opportunity or resist the temptation to engage in a conversation. Just want to let it,
Hang out.
Speak your mind, and we'll sort it out after. We know that people get emotional when they're frustrated about things. It's actually helpful to express that so that the people who are in a position to think about the process can make necessary changes. But things will only get better if people put data on the table that we can respond to and adjust to. So I would really encourage people to participate in all of that.
When is that? September 13th?
September 13th at 7 p.m. Okay. It does not conflict with any of your meetings. I believe that is a Wednesday night.
Thursday night.
Is it? If you meet, all right, you meet on the 4th, but that's a Tuesday because of the holiday. It's a Thursday. I stand corrected. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Okay. Do we have any old business?
Well, old business, a little bit. Every now and then, I see and people talk to me about Main Street and how that can be a little crazy. So I've been a little hyper-focused on coming from the east into town. And I think we did a pretty good job coming into town from 16 by Cummings Court there. There's signage. I just wonder if there's maybe a flashing light or something at a corner that will just let people know that, hello Connecticut, hello Rhode Island, you're coming into a small New England town's Main Street. I'll send a picture to you guys after. It was pulled out of the post office the other day, and it was just impossible to get by. It's not every day that a huge dump truck is parked right there, but as I pulled out, the guys are going 40, 45 miles, maybe not 45, but fast enough to say, maybe we can do a little better here. So I'd like to revisit that and see if there's something we can do on that side of Main Street. Safety first.
Safety first, always.
Any other old business? No? Any new business? Nothing, huh?
Nothing from me.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, would you entertain a motion
by Tim
to
Bowman.
enter into executive session for the purposes of litigation and to leave executive session for the purposes of adjournment.
I would second that motion.
Made by Mike and seconded by Dave. Moving forward, known as the Bonin motion.
There's a roll call vote.
Roll call vote. I was just getting ready to say that.
Bowman, aye.
There was a pause.
Kevin Morris, aye.
Dave Cortez, aye.